Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting through the world of legendary Pokémon, those rare and powerful beings that exist somewhere between myth and reality. From the original 4 that began it all to the 74 that appear across every region today, each one carries a story and a purpose woven quietly into its world. Over the years, they've grown from a small, mysterious group into a wide pantheon of guardians, creators, and cosmic forces, shaping oceans, forests, timelines, and even the space between dimensions. Some calmed storms with a single beat of their wings, others carved continents into place, and a few who were born from distant stars or human ambition pushed too far. Before we drift any further, make sure to subscribe so once we reach 1,000 subscribers, I can reduce the ads, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. The legendary birds arrived first, tucked away in hidden corners of the Kanto region where only the most persistent trainers would venture to find them. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres became the foundation for what legendary Pokemon could be, each one representing a force of nature that felt genuinely untouchable in those early days. They weren't just powerful creatures you could add to your team. They were rewards for exploration, proof that you'd traveled into the deepest caves and the most forgotten places. Each bird drew inspiration from mythological creatures that existed in cultures around the world, quietly connecting the Pokemon universe to our own ancient stories. Articuno carries echoes of the Persian Huma, a legendary bird said to never touch the ground and bring fortune to anyone who glimpsed its shadow passing overhead. Zapdos reflects the Native American thunderbird, a powerful spirit creature whose wing beats created thunder and whose eyes flashed with lightning. Moltres embodies the phoenix, that eternal bird of flame and rebirth that rises from its own ashes, forever cycling through death and renewal. The naming pattern for these three reveals a gentle cleverness that many players notice only years after their first encounter with them. Each name blends their elemental nature with a Spanish number, creating something that sounds both exotic and strangely familiar. Articuno combines Arctic with uno, the Spanish word for one. Zapdos merges zap with dos, meaning two. Moltres fuses molten with trace, the number 3. It's a small detail, but it adds a layer of intentionality to their design that makes them feel even more carefully crafted. Articuno possesses the ability to freeze moisture in the air around it, creating blizzards so powerful they can blanket entire mountain ranges in snow within minutes. The Pokedex entries tell us that this ice bird appears to people who are lost on icy mountains, though whether it saves them or simply watches their fate unfold remains unclear in some tellings. Its presence alone drops temperatures dramatically, and some accounts claim that when Articuno flaps its wings, the air itself crystallizes into tiny ice particles that shimmer as they fall. Zapdos generates storms through the rapid beating of its wings, and it grows stronger when struck by lightning during these tempests. The crackling energy that surrounds its body constantly builds and releases, creating the distinctive sound of electricity arcing through metal that echoes through the abandoned power plant where it makes its home. Old stories suggest that Zapdos can store tremendous amounts of electrical energy within its body, releasing it all at once in devastating displays that light up the sky for miles around. Moltres carries the power to bring early spring to any frozen land it visits, melting snow and ice through the intense heat it radiates constantly. If this firebird is injured, it will dive into the molten heart of a volcano, letting the lava heal its wounds and restore its flames to their full brilliance. Its feathers burn with such intensity that they leave trails of fire in the air as it flies, and some legends claim that a single feather from Moltres can warm an entire village through the coldest winter. The stat distribution among the three birds reveals their intended roles in battle, though Moltres often gets treated as the least valuable despite its offensive capabilities. Articuno leans heavily into defensive stats, with strong special defense and decent physical bulk that lets it weather hits while setting up icy hazards. Zapdos claims the title of fastest among the trio, using its speed and respectable special attack to strike quickly and decisively. Moltres occupies a strange middle ground, possessing solid offensive stats but lacking the speed or defensive capabilities that would make it truly dominant in competitive play. These birds have taken on various forms throughout the franchise's history, each iteration adding new layers to their mythology. The Pokemon Adventures manga introduced Thuphizer, a horrifying fusion of all three legendary birds created through twisted experimentation. This combined form possessed the powers of ice, electricity, and fire all at once, creating a being of tremendous destructive potential. Fortunately, this fusion proved unstable, and the three birds eventually separated back into their individual forms after being defeated in battle. Shadow versions of the legendary birds appeared in Pokemon Colosseum Gale of Darkness, where they became corrupted versions of their former selves. Shadow Articuno wielded Shadow Chill, a dark ice attack that struck with supernatural cold. Shadow Zapdos commanded Shadow Bolt, crackling with corrupted electrical energy. Shadow Moltres burned with Shadow Fire, flames tainted by darkness itself. These shadow forms represented what happens when legendary power falls into the wrong hands and becomes twisted into something unnatural. The Galar region introduced something entirely unexpected when it revealed regional variants of the legendary birds, marking the first time any legendary Pokemon had received this treatment. Galarian Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres bear only superficial resemblance to their Cantonian counterparts, each one possessing completely different typings and stat distributions that change how they function in battle. This creative decision suggested that perhaps what we call legendary birds might actually be different species entirely, connected only by name and general appearance. Galarian Articuno abandoned ice typing entirely to become a psychic and flying type, transforming into a special attacker rather than a defensive wall. Its design incorporates elements of a masquerade mask, giving it an elegant and mysterious appearance that fits its new psychic nature. This variant can create blades of pure psychic energy shaped like feathers, sharp enough to cut through solid iron as if it were paper. Its signature move, Freezing Glare, can completely immobilize opponents caught in its icy psychic stare, leaving them unable to move or defend themselves. Galarian Zapdos trades electrical power for pure fighting prowess, becoming a physical attacker with incredibly powerful legs that can pulverize dump trucks with a single kick. This flightless bird runs across the landscape at speeds exceeding 180 miles per hour, its powerful limbs carrying it faster than most flying Pokemon can travel through the air. The design draws inspiration from Kiwis and Roadrunners, creating a unique aesthetic rarely seen in the Pokemon series. Its fighting typing makes it a genuine threat in close combat, where its overwhelming strength can overwhelm even the sturdiest opponents. Galarian Moltres embraced darkness, becoming a dark and flying type with a focus on special defense rather than offense. This variant radiates an aura that consumes the spirit of anything it touches, leaving behind nothing but burnt shadows on the ground where living things once stood. The transformation into a dark type gives it a sinister edge that the original Moltres never possessed, turning it from a symbol of renewal into something far more ominous and threatening. Its presence alone drains the vitality from its surroundings, creating an atmosphere of oppression and fear. Mewtwo stands as probably the most iconic legendary Pokemon ever created, a being born not from nature, but from human ambition and scientific hubris. The story of its creation involves Mr. Fuji's attempt to clone Mew, the ancestor of all Pokemon, through a series of brutal gene splicing experiments designed to create the most powerful Pokemon that could ever exist. The result exceeded all expectations, producing a psychic powerhouse whose strength far surpassed anything the natural world had created. But power came with a cost, as Mewtwo emerged from its creation, traumatized, angry, and deeply questioning its own purpose and existence. The complete story of Mewtwo's origins varies between different versions, each one adding new layers of tragedy to its birth. In the uncut story revealed in Mewtwo's origins, we learn that Mr. Fuji wasn't simply trying to clone Mew for scientific achievement. He was attempting to bring back his deceased daughter, Amber, using cloning technology. Team Rocket provided funding for this research in exchange for a superior clone of Mew that they could use for their own purposes. This version of the story adds a deeply human element of grief and desperation to Mewtwo's creation, making its existence the result of a father's inability to let go. Multiple Mewtwo exist across different continuities, a fact that surprises many fans who assume there's only one. The Gensect movie featured an entirely separate Mewtwo with a different personality and backstory, suggesting that other scientists successfully recreated the cloning process that brought the first Mewtwo into existence. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, Blaine uses cells from his own arm to complete Mewtwo's creation, establishing a biological link between trainer and Pokemon that allows them to sense each other's pain and emotions across vast distances. Regardless of which origin story you follow, Mewtwo possesses devastating psychic power that puts it far above almost anything else that existed in the original games. Its special attack stat of 154 put it 20 points ahead of any other Pokemon available in Red and Blue, making it the undisputed champion of raw offensive potential. Trainers who managed to catch Mewtwo found themselves wielding a creature that could single-handedly dismantle entire teams, its psychic abilities overwhelming nearly every opponent it faced. Generation 6 introduced not one, but two Mega Evolutions for Mewtwo, pushing its already incredible power to even more absurd heights. Mega Mewtwo X gains a fighting type alongside its psychic nature, transforming into a physical powerhouse with an attack stat of 190 that lets it demolish opponents through sheer force. Mega Mewtwo Y doubles down on special attacking, achieving a special attack of 194 that makes it one of the most powerful special attackers in the entire series. Both forms boast a base stat total of 780, tying them with Mega Rayquaza for the highest in the game, surpassed only by Eternamax Eternatus, which most players agree doesn't really count, since you can't actually use it in normal battles. Other forms of Mewtwo have appeared in various spin-off games and media, each one exploring different aspects of what this cloned Pokemon could become. Armored Mewtwo, seen in Pokemon Go and the trading card game, encases the psychic creature in a suit of protective armor designed to restrain and control its incredible power. Shadow Mewtwo emerged in Pokken Tournament, corrupted by a Shadow Synergy Stone that twisted its psychic abilities into something darker and more violent. This shadow form can even access Mega Evolution through its burst attack, creating a terrifying combination of corrupted energy and overwhelming power that few opponents can withstand. As we drift a little deeper into this topic, we find ourselves moving from the skies and laboratories of Kanto into entirely new realms of legendary power. The legendary birds and Mewtwo established what these special Pokemon could be, but they were only the beginning, each new generation would expand the concept further, introducing legendary Pokemon tied to creation itself, to the fundamental forces that govern reality, to concepts so vast they challenge our understanding of what a Pokemon can represent. Generation 2 introduced the legendary beasts, three Pokemon resurrected by Ho-Oh after they perished in the burning of Brass Tower in Ecruteak City. Raikou, Entei, and Suicune emerged from the ashes as entirely new beings, their original forms lost forever to the flames that consumed them. These three wander the Johto region endlessly, never staying in one place for long, always moving forward as if searching for something they can never quite find. Their constant motion reflects the restless energy of their rebirth, forever changed by the tragedy that created them. Raikou embodies the lightning that struck Brass Tower and set it ablaze, its body crackling with electrical energy that builds up as storm clouds gather overhead. The Thunder Pokemon races across the land at incredible speeds, leaving scorched earth in its wake as excess electricity arcs from its body to the ground. Its roar sounds like thunder cracking across the sky, powerful enough to shake buildings and send weaker Pokemon fleeing in terror. Ancient legends claim that Raikou can summon thunderstorms simply by being present, the atmosphere itself responding to the electrical charge it constantly generates. Entei represents the volcanic fury and purifying flame, a massive beast whose very presence raises temperatures and causes the ground to steam and crack beneath its paws. The volcano Pokemon possesses the power to create volcanic eruptions through sheer force of will, though it rarely exercises this ability except in the most dire circumstances. Its roar can level mountains, and the flames that billow from its back burn hot enough to melt steel. Some stories suggest that Entei is born anew each time a volcano forms, though whether this means multiple Entei exist or a single one migrates between eruptions remains unclear. Suicune carries the purity of the north wind, possessing the ability to cleanse polluted water simply by touching it. The Aurora Pokemon glides across the land with impossible grace, its flowing mane trailing behind like ribbons of water frozen in mid-motion. Unlike Raikou and Entei, Suicune seems to actively seek out humans, appearing before those with pure hearts as if testing their worthiness. Crystal version elevated Suicune to the role of that game's mascot legendary, giving players the opportunity to track it down across Johto and Kanto before finally earning the chance to catch it at the Tin Tower. Ho-Oh soars above all of Johto as a symbol of hope and renewal, its rainbow wings catching the light and scattering it across the sky in brilliant prismatic displays. This legendary bird appears only to trainers with pure hearts, revealing itself to those worthy of witnessing its majesty. The rainbow Pokemon possesses the power to resurrect the dead, as demonstrated when it brought the three beasts back from the ashes of Brass Tower. Its sacred fire burns with holy flames that can never be extinguished, and those touched by its ashes are said to receive eternal happiness. The legend of Ho-Oh ties deeply into Johto's history and culture, with the people of Ecruteak City building two towers in its honor. The Brass Tower served as a perch where Ho-Oh would roost, while the Bell Tower represented humanity's reverence for the legendary bird. When the Brass Tower burned down, claiming the lives of three Pokemon, Ho-Oh resurrected them as Raikou, Entei, and Suicune before departing, saddened by human carelessness. Since then, it appears only rarely, choosing those it deems worthy to receive its blessing and witness its rainbow wings spreading across the sky. Lugia dwells in the depths beneath the Whirl Islands, a psychic and flying type that serves as the guardian of the sea and master of the legendary birds. The diving Pokemon possesses such incredible power that merely flapping its wings can create storms capable of lasting 40 days and obliterating entire coastal towns. For this reason, Lugia chooses to live in isolation at the bottom of the ocean, away from civilization where its power cannot accidentally harm innocent people. Its gentle nature contrasts sharply with its devastating potential, creating a being that is simultaneously one of the most powerful and most benevolent legendary Pokemon. The relationship between Lugia and the legendary birds forms a key part of Johto's mythology, though this connection actually originated in the second Pokemon movie, rather than the games themselves. The movie depicted Lugia as the only force capable of calming Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres when their conflict threatened to tear the world apart. This guardian role eventually made its way into the games, establishing Lugia as a creature of balance that maintains harmony between opposing elemental forces. Its signature move, Aeroblast, fires compressed air with such force it can shatter mountains and create valleys where solid ground once stood. Celebi transcends time itself, traveling freely between past, present, and future through the forests it protects. This small grass and psychic type appears only in times of peace, using its ability to move through time to ensure that the forests it guards remain healthy across all eras. The time travel Pokemon brings vitality wherever it appears, causing flowers to bloom and plants to flourish simply through its presence. Ancient legends claim that forests where Celebi dwells will stand forever, protected across all timelines by this gentle guardian that refuses to let them fall to destruction. The myth of Celebi carries a bittersweet edge, as it's said to appear only during periods of peace, meaning its absence signals coming conflict. In times of war and strife, Celebi vanishes into the time stream, perhaps traveling to Eris, where its presence can do more good. This selective appearance makes encountering Celebi incredibly rare and special, a sign that the world has achieved the balance and harmony this legendary Pokemon requires before it will reveal itself. Its signature move, Heal Bell, cures all status conditions of its allies, reflecting its nature as a creature of restoration and renewal. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off, and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. Generation 3 brought legendary Pokemon directly tied to the creation of the Hoenn region itself, massive beings whose ancient conflict literally shaped the land and sea. Groudon and Kyogre represent the fundamental opposition between earth and ocean, two primordial forces locked in eternal struggle. Their battles long ago created the geography of Hoenn, with Groudon raising continents from the sea, while Kyogre drowned them again in endless cycles. Only the intervention of Rayquaza, flying high above in the stratosphere, could bring their conflict to an end and allow the region to finally stabilize into its current form. Groudon embodies the land itself, a massive ground type whose body contains the heat and pressure of the Earth's core. The continent Pokemon possesses the power to create new landmasses by causing volcanic eruptions and raising the seafloor through tectonic shifts. Its signature ability, Drought, brings harsh sunlight that evaporates water and strengthens fire-type moves, reflecting its desire to expand the land at the ocean's expense. Ancient Hoenn texts describe Groudon as the creator of all dry land, sleeping in magma deep beneath the earth until the time comes for it to wake and reshape the world once more. Primal Reversion allows Groudon to access its original form from the ancient past, becoming even more powerful than its modern incarnation. Primal Groudon gains the Fire type alongside its ground typing, and its new ability, Desolate Land, creates sunlight so intense that water-type moves evaporate before they can even reach their target. This transformation reveals what Groudon was like during its prime, when it actively battled Kyogre for control of the planet. The sheer heat radiating from Primal Groudon's body can melt stone and turn sand into glass, making it a walking apocalypse that reshapes the environment simply by existing within it. Kyogre rules the oceans as a massive water type whose power over precipitation and currents gives it dominion over all aquatic life. The sea basin Pokemon can create massive rainstorms and tsunamis through its control of water, expanding the ocean and drowning land masses that Groudon raises. Its signature ability, Drizzle, brings endless rain that weakens fire types and empowers water moves, directly opposing Groudon's harsh sunlight. Legends say that Kyogre created the world's oceans through endless rainstorms that lasted for eons, filling every depression and valley until only the highest peaks remained above water. Primal Kyogre transforms into its original form through primal reversion, accessing the tremendous power it wielded during the Ancient Age. This form's ability, Primordial Sea, creates rain so heavy that fire-type moves are completely negated, unable to ignite in the downpour. The transformation makes Kyogre even larger and more imposing, with glowing patterns across its body that pulse with primordial energy. Ancient murals depict Primal Kyogre as a force of nature that flooded the entire world, creating an ocean planet where only it could thrive until Rayquaza intervened to restore balance. Rayquaza soars through the ozone layer, far above where Groudon and Kyogre wage their eternal war. This dragon and flying type serves as the mediator between land and sea, descending only when their conflict threatens to destroy the world. The sky-high Pokemon feeds on meteorites and particles in the upper atmosphere, growing more powerful with each cosmic meal it consumes. Its signature move, Dragon Ascent, has it plummet from the sky with devastating force, striking targets with the power of a meteor impact. Ancient peoples worshipped Rayquaza as a deity that maintained balance between the warring titans below, ensuring neither could gain total victory and destroy all life in their struggle. Mega Rayquaza achieved something no other Pokemon had ever done before, accessing Mega Evolution without requiring a Mega Stone. Instead, Rayquaza must know Dragon Ascent, allowing it to Mega Evolve through its own power alone. This makes it the only Pokemon that can hold an item while Mega Evolved, giving it unprecedented versatility in battle. Mega Rayquaza's ability, Delta Stream, creates mysterious strong winds that negate the type advantages against flying types, protecting it from the ice, rock, and electric moves that would normally threaten it. With a base's stat total of 780, Mega Rayquaza ties it with Mega Mewtwo X and Y as one of the strongest Pokemon ever created. The Regi trio emerged from Regigigus's desire to create servants that could help it shape the world, golems constructed from different materials to serve different purposes. Regirock formed from clay and stone, its body constantly shedding and reforming as it repairs damage by incorporating new rocks into its structure. Regis crystallized from ice, formed during the Ice Age, so cold that even magma cannot melt its frozen body. Registeel condensed from an unknown metal, harder than any substance science has identified, completely resistant to corrosion or damage from the elements. These three golems stand as monuments to Regigigus's creative power, artificial life given form and purpose. The mystery surrounding the Regis extends to their origins and purpose, with ancient ruins across Hoenn holding clues to their creation. Sealed away in separate chambers, each Regi requires solving complex puzzles to reach, as if whoever imprisoned them wanted to ensure only the worthy could release them. The strange patterns across their bodies resemble Braille, the written language for the blind, creating an accessibility element that many players found touching and meaningful. Their robotic appearance and mechanical cries set them apart from other legendary Pokemon, making them feel like ancient machines rather than living creatures. Latias and Latios represent a rare example of legendary Pokemon with distinct gender differences, a pair of psychic and dragon types that share a deep empathic connection. These siblings possess the ability to disguise themselves as humans through their psychic powers, allowing them to move through cities undetected while observing human behavior. Latias appears as the red sibling, more playful and curious about the human world. Latios manifests as the blue counterpart, more serious and protective of its sister. Together, they guard Alto Mare, a city built on water channels where they protect the Soul Dew, a mystical gem created from the essence of their deceased parents. The Soul Dew holds tremendous power, capable of protecting entire cities from disaster when placed in specific locations that channel its energy. In the movie Heroes, the Soul Dew's power protects Alto Mare from flooding, maintaining the water channels and preventing the city from sinking into the sea. Game mechanics originally gave the Soul Dew to either Latias or Latios to hold, boosting their special attack and special defense by 50%, though later generations nerfed this overwhelming advantage. The connection between the Lati twins and the Soul Dew emphasizes themes of family and legacy, with the power of previous generations protecting those who come after. Mega Evolution granted both Latias and Latios new forms that enhanced their already impressive speed and special stats. Mega Latias gains balanced increases across its offensive and defensive capabilities, becoming a versatile special tank that can take hits while dealing consistent damage. Mega Latios focuses entirely on offense, with special attack and speed increases that make it a devastating hit-and-run attacker. Both Mega forms lose their Levitate ability in favor of Levitate. Wait, that's the same ability, because apparently Game Freak couldn't think of anything more creative for hovering psychic dragon jets. Jirachi appears for only 7 days every 1,000 years when it awakens from its long slumber, during which it can grant wishes to those pure of heart. This steel and psychic type sleeps inside a crystalline cocoon that protects it while it rests, waking only when it senses the presence of someone with a genuine wish worth granting. The Wish Pokemon possesses 3 tags on its head that absorb the energy of wishes, channeling them through Jirachi's body to make them reality. Its signature move, Doom Desire, gathers steel energy over 2 turns before unleashing it in a devastating delayed attack, reflecting how wishes often take time to manifest. The mythology around Jirachi emphasizes the purity of wishes and the importance of wanting the right things for the right reasons. Corrupt or selfish wishes become twisted in the granting, teaching those who try to abuse Jirachi's power that true wishes must come from genuine need and good intentions. The 7-day limitation prevents anyone from hoarding Jirachi or forcing it to grant endless wishes, ensuring its power remains rare and special. Ancient legends claim that the meteor that brought Jirachi to Earth still hangs in the night sky, and once every millennium it draws close enough for Jirachi to wake and share its blessing with the world below. Deoxys originated from a space virus that mutated after exposure to a laser beam, transforming it into a powerful psychic type with the ability to change its form at will. This alien Pokemon possesses intelligence far beyond most species, allowing it to manipulate its own DNA and adapt to different situations by shifting between 4 distinct forms. Normal form balances its stats evenly, making it versatile but not specialized. Attack form maximizes offense at the cost of all defensive capabilities, creating a glass cannon that hits devastatingly hard. Defense form inverts this, becoming nearly indestructible while sacrificing offensive power. Speed form pushes its speed stat to 180, making it the fastest Pokemon in the game while maintaining respectable attack. The story of Deoxys emphasizes themes of adaptation and survival, showing how life finds ways to persist even in the harshest environments. Born from a virus in the vacuum of space, exposed to radiation and energy that would destroy most organisms, Deoxys not only survived, but evolved into something magnificent. Its ability to change forms represents the ultimate expression of adaptation, becoming whatever it needs to be to overcome any challenge. The crystalline structure in its chest serves as its brain, and damage to this core causes Deoxys immense pain, making it one of the few legendary Pokemon with a clear weak point. Another quiet detail appears when we look closer at Generation 4, which expanded the concept of legendary Pokemon to include the very creators of the Pokemon universe itself. Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina emerged from Arceus to govern time, space, and antimatter, respectively, forming a trio of such cosmic power that their conflicts could unravel reality itself. These creation trio members represent fundamental aspects of existence, forces that must remain in balance or risk tearing apart the fabric of the universe they were created to maintain. Dialga controls all of time, possessing the power to slow, stop, or reverse the flow of temporal progression at will. The steel and dragon type embodies the relentless forward march of seconds into minutes, into hours, into eternity, an unstoppable force that governs when things happen and in what sequence. Its signature move, Roar of Time, distorts temporal flow so severely that even Dialga must rest afterward, unable to act for a full turn as it recovers from the strain of manipulating such fundamental forces. The diamond embedded in its chest represents the crystallization of time itself, and legends say that time began flowing when Dialga drew its first breath. Ancient Sinnoh myths describe Dialga's birth at the moment creation began, when nothingness gave way to existence, and time started its endless march forward. Without Dialga, the concept of sequence would not exist, and then everything would happen simultaneously in a chaotic mess of events with no cause or effect. The temporal Pokemon resides in a dimension parallel to our own, maintaining the flow of time from outside normal space. Its presence in the mortal world creates temporal distortions, areas where time flows at different speeds or occasionally reverses entirely, aging objects backwards or freezing them in eternal moments. Palkia governs space itself, wielding complete control over the physical dimensions that allow matter to exist in relation to other matter. This water and dragon type can distort space to create new regions or collapse existing ones, effectively rewriting the layout of reality through sheer force of will. Its signature move, Spatial Rend, tears the holes in the fabric of space itself, creating wounds in reality that deal devastating damage and have an increased critical hit rate. The pearl embedded in its shoulder represents the expansion of space, and myths claim that space began spreading when Palkia first extended its limbs. The relationship between Palkia and Dialga defines much of Sinnoh's legendary lore, as these two beings represent inseparable aspects of the universe that nevertheless exist in constant tension. Time cannot exist without space to flow through, and space holds no meaning without time to give it sequence and change. Yet their powers oppose each other fundamentally, with temporal control clashing against spatial manipulation in ways that threaten to tear apart reality when they fight. Ancient texts warn that should Dialga and Palkia ever battle seriously, their conflict would unravel creation itself, returning the universe to the primordial nothingness that existed before Arceus shaped it into being. Giratina embodies antimatter and dwells in the distortion world, a twisted realm where the normal laws of physics do not apply. Banished by Arceus for its violence and destructive tendencies, this ghost and dragon type rules over a dimension of reversed gravity, impossible geometry, and constantly shifting platforms that defy logical explanation. The distortion world serves as a mirror to our own reality, existing alongside it, but separate, connected through tiers in space-time that Giratina can use to pass between realms. Its signature move, Shadow Force, allows it to slip into another dimension entirely, becoming intangible before reappearing to strike with tremendous force. The reason for Giratina's banishment varies between interpretations, though most agree it involved excessive violence or a challenge to Arceus's authority. Some versions suggest Giratina attacked the other members of the creation trio, forcing Arceus to imprison it where it could not harm them. Others propose that Giratina's antimatter nature made it fundamentally incompatible with what's normal reality, requiring its exile not as punishment, but as necessity. Regardless of the reason, Giratina clearly resents its imprisonment, as evidenced by its immediate aggression when encountered and its attempts to drag the player into the distortion world in Platinum. Origin Form reveals Giratina's true appearance when it exists within the distortion world, transforming from a serpentine creature into something more insectoid and unsettling. 6 spectral wings or legs extend from its body, allowing it to float through the reversed gravity of its domain. This form swaps its defensive stats for more offense-oriented ones, and its ability changes from pressure to levitate, making it immune to ground-type moves. The transformation that emphasizes how Giratina is a creature of its environment, most powerful and comfortable in the twisted realm it has been forced to call home. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf emerged from Arceus to bring knowledge, emotion, and willpower to the world, completing the creation of conscious life. These 3 small psychic types dwell at the bottom of 3 different lakes across Sinnoh, connected through an invisible network that links their minds across vast distances. According to legend, when they were born, humans gained the ability to solve problems, feel emotions, and make determined choices. Without these 3 beings, humanity would lack the fundamental aspects of consciousness that separate us from simple animals operating on instinct alone. Uxie represents knowledge and memory, possessing every bit of information that has ever been known by any living thing. The knowledge. Pokemon keeps its eyes closed at all times, because any being who looks into them has their memory instantly wiped clean, forgetting everything they ever knew. This devastating defensive mechanism ensures that no one can easily capture or control Uxie, as simply approaching it with hostile intent risks losing yourself entirely. Legends claim that Uxie taught humans their first words and showed them how to record information, giving our species the gift of accumulated knowledge that allows each generation to build on the discoveries of those before. Mesprit embodies emotion and empathy, the ability to feel joy, sorrow, love, and all the complex feelings that make life meaningful. The emotion. Pokemon famously fled when first encountered in Diamond and Pearl, roaming across Sinnoh while the player pursued it with a mixture of luck and persistence. Its signature ability to sense and manipulate emotions makes it deeply connected to the emotional state of those around it, and some legends suggest that Mesprit visits people in their dreams to help them process difficult feelings. The gift of emotion allowed humanity to form bonds and societies, connecting individuals through shared feelings that transcend simple survival needs. Azelf provides willpower and determination, the strength of spirit that allows beings to pursue goals despite obstacles and setbacks. The willpower Pokemon can completely paralyze anyone who harms it, as if their will to move vanishes entirely when faced with its anger. This defense mechanism reflects how willpower connects directly to our ability to act, and without determination, we become frozen, unable to commit to any course of action. Ancient stories credit Azelf with giving humanity the drive to explore, to build, and to strive for improvement, planting the seed of ambition that pushes us to achieve more than simple survival. The Lake Guardians share a unique connection to the creation trio, serving as limiters that prevent Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina from using their full power. The red chains forged from Lake Guardian gems can bind and control the creation trio, though doing so causes the Lake Guardians immense pain as their essence is forcibly extracted and weaponized. Team Galactic's plan in Diamond and Pearl revolved around capturing the Lake Guardians and using them to summon and control either Dialga or Palkia, demonstrating the dangerous potential of these small psychic types, despite their benign appearance and gentle natures. Heatran stands as an unusual legendary Pokémon, unique in that it can be either male or female, despite being part of the legendary classification. This fire and steel type dwells in volcanic chambers, feeding on molten lava and using its cross-shaped feet to cling to walls and ceilings inside magma tubes. The Lava Dome Pokémon possesses blood that runs so hot it boils inside its body, requiring constant temperature regulation to prevent it from literally cooking itself from the inside. Its signature ability, Flash Fire, makes it immune to fire-type moves and powers up its own flames when hit, allowing it to thrive in volcanic environments that would instantly incinerate most other Pokémon. The myths surrounding Heatran suggest it was born when lava hardened during a volcanic eruption, cooling into a living creature that retained the heat and power of molten rock. Unlike many legendary Pokémon, with clear roles as guardians or creators, Heatran simply exists, dwelling in the deepest volcanic chambers where it can feed and rest. This more animalistic nature makes it feel less like a god and more like an extremely rare and powerful species that happens to be classified as legendary. Its ability to breed in the game's code, despite being legendary, further emphasizes this unusual status, though Game Freak disabled actual breeding to maintain legendary exclusivity. Regigigas towers above the other Regis as their creator and master, a colossal normal type that literally shaped continents through its tremendous physical strength. According to legend, Regigigas pulled the continents into their current positions using ropes, dragging massive land masses across the ocean to create the world's geography. This incredible feat of strength left it exhausted, and now, when it wakes from slumber, it requires time to warm up before accessing its full power. The slow start ability reflects this mythological weakness, having Regigigas's attack and speed for the first 5 turns of battle, and making it nearly useless despite having the highest attack stat of any normal type. The tragedy of Regigigas lies in how its signature ability completely undermines its legendary status, transforming what should be an overwhelming force of nature into a liability that opponents can easily handle. Despite base stats totaling 680, putting it on par with other legendary Pokémon, slow start ensures that by the time Regigigas reaches full power, the battle has often already been decided. This design choice has puzzled and frustrated players for years, as it seems unnecessarily cruel to create such a conceptually powerful Pokémon only to saddle it with a crippling ability that makes it nearly unusable in serious competitive play. The legend of how Regigigas created the Regi trio adds depth to their relationship, explaining why Regirock, Regice, and Registeel all share similar design elements and strange behavior patterns. After shaping the continents, Regigigas felt lonely in its task and created servants to help with the remaining work. From clay and stone, it formed Regirock to help build mountains. From ancient ice, it crystallized Rigiti to freeze water and create glaciers. From an unknown metal, it condensed Registeel to reinforce the Earth's crust. These three golems worked alongside their creator until the task was complete, at which point all four entered a long sleep, waiting to be awakened when the world needed reshaping once again. Cresselia brings peaceful dreams to those suffering from nightmares, a psychic type that embodies the gentle rest everyone deserves at the end of a long day. The lunar Pokemon drifts on lunar wings that trail particles of glowing light, leaving a shimmering path across the night sky as it travels. Its signature move, Lunar Dance, sacrifices Cresselia's remaining health to fully heal and restore an ally Pokemon, reflecting the selfless nature of this gentle legendary. Ancient myths describe Cresselia as the bringer of good dreams, appearing in the night to soothe troubled minds and replace nightmares with peaceful visions of happiness and hope. The relationship between Cresselia and Darkrai forms one of Pokemon's clearest examples of opposing forces, light and dark, good dreams and nightmares. While Cresselia heals and comforts, Darkrai inflicts endless nightmares on anyone who approaches it. Yet this opposition isn't truly adversarial, as Darkrai cannot control its nightmare-inducing ability and isolates itself specifically to avoid harming others. The two exist in balance, necessary counterparts that give meaning to each other's existence. Without nightmares, peaceful dreams would hold no special value, and without the possibility of good dreams, nightmares would become unbearable. Darkrai forces anyone near it into a deep sleep filled with endless nightmares, a dark type that cannot control this terrible ability and chooses self-imposed exile rather than harm innocent beings. The pitch-black Pokemon lurks on New Moon Island, hiding from civilization where its presence cannot accidentally torment people or Pokemon. Its signature move, Dark Void, puts opponents to sleep with a shadowy void that fills their minds with terrible visions. Despite its fearsome power and sinister appearance, Darkrai is fundamentally a tragic figure cursed with an ability it never wanted and forced into loneliness to protect others from itself. The movie Rise of Darkrai revealed a more sympathetic portrayal of this misunderstood legendary, showing how it protected a town from Dialga and Palkia's battle, despite knowing the townspeople feared and hated it. This depiction emphasized that Darkrai's nightmares are not malicious, but rather an unfortunate side effect of its nature, something it would stop if it could. The movie's Darkrai sacrificed itself to save the town, demonstrating that even a Pokemon associated with darkness and bad dreams can act with nobility and selflessness when the situation demands heroism. Shaman exists in two distinct forms, land form and sky form, representing the gratitude that fills the world when people appreciate nature's beauty. This grass type, or grass and flying type, absorbs toxins from the atmosphere and purifies them, releasing clean air in a process that makes polluted areas bloom with flowers overnight. The Gratitude Pokemon migrates to flower fields during specific seasons where hundreds of shaman gather to create massive displays of gratitude that transform barren landscapes into gardens of impossible beauty. Its signature move, Seed Flare, creates an explosion of life energy that may sharply lower the target's special defense, overwhelming them with raw, natural power. Skyform transforms Shaman from a small hedgehog-like creature into something resembling a graceful deer or dog with flowing features and the ability to fly. This form can only be accessed during the day and requires Shaman to be holding a Gracidia flower, a special bloom that reacts to its gratitude energy. Sky form possesses drastically different stats from land form, trading defensive bulk for speed and offense that make it far more viable in competitive battles. The transformation reflects how gratitude can elevate and change us, taking something small and humble and allowing it to soar above previous limitations. The mythology around Shaman emphasizes themes of appreciation and reciprocity, teaching that expressing gratitude for nature's gifts allows those gifts to flourish and multiply. Ancient cultures would offer thanks to Shaman after successful harvests, believing that showing appreciation ensured future abundance. The flowers that bloom in Shaman's wake symbolize how gratitude creates beauty and new growth, transforming even the most damaged environments into places of life and color. This gentle philosophy makes Shaman one of the more wholesome legendary Pokemon, its entire existence built around positive emotions and healthy relationships with the natural world. Arceus stands above all other Pokemon as the creator of everything, the original one who emerged from nothingness and shaped existence itself. This normal type possesses the ability to change into any type through the use of plates, ancient artifacts that contain fragments of Arceus's creative power. The legend describes how Arceus hatched from an egg in a place where nothing existed, then created Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina to govern time, space, and antimatter. After establishing the fundamental structure of reality, it created Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf to bring consciousness, emotion, and willpower to living beings. With the universe complete, Arceus entered a deep sleep, watching over creation from a place beyond normal perception. The plates that allow Arceus to change types each represent a different aspect of creation, 17 tablets inscribed with the essence of each type's fundamental nature. Holding a plate transforms Arceus into that type and boosts moves of that type by 20%, making it incredibly versatile and allowing it to adapt to any situation. This type-changing ability reflects Arceus's status as the source of all types, containing within itself the potential for every form of energy and matter that exists in the Pokemon world. Ancient texts claim that the plates fell from Arceus's body as it created the universe, each one a shard of divine power that mortals can barely comprehend. The signature move. Judgment calls down beams of light that change type based on which plate Arceus holds, creating a devastating attack that can exploit weaknesses no matter what type the opponent might be. This move literally judges the target, weighing them and finding them wanting before striking with purifying light. Combined with Arceus's solid base stats of 120 across the board, totaling 720 overall, Judgment makes Arceus one of the most flexible and powerful Pokemon in existence. Its multi-type ability prevents other Pokemon from changing or removing Arceus's type, ensuring that once it commits to a form, nothing can force it to change until it chooses to do so. Mythological accounts describe Arceus as a generally benevolent deity that cares for its creation, though it can become wrathful when humans act with cruelty or disrespect toward nature. The movie Arceus and the Jewel of Life portrayed a betrayal that soured Arceus's view of humanity, showing how even a god can be hurt by treachery and broken promises. This more complex characterization makes Arceus feel less like an all-powerful force and more like a being with emotions and the capacity for both forgiveness and vengeance. The conflict between its divine nature and its emotional responses creates interesting tension in how Arceus engages with the world it created. As we drift a little deeper into this topic, we arrive at Generation 5, which introduced legendary Pokemon representing ideals and truth, concepts rather than physical forces. Reshiram and Zekrom embody these opposing philosophies, massive dragon types that once formed a single being before splitting apart due to the conflict between twin heroes. Their designs reflect their philosophical natures, with Reshiram appearing as a white dragon wreathed in flames representing the passion of ideals, while Zekrom manifests as a black dragon crackling with electricity representing the certainty of truth. Reshiram pursues truth through the lens of ideals, believing that what should be matters as much as what is. This dragon and fire type will incinerate anyone who tries to build a world based on lies, using its blue flames to burn away falsehood and leave only authentic ideals. Its signature move, Blue Flare, releases flames so intense they can reduce entire cities to ash, though Reshiram uses this devastating power only against those who have strayed from their true ideals. Ancient Unova legends describe Reshiram appearing to heroes who fight for noble causes, lending its power to those whose ideals align with justice and truth. The legend of how Reshiram and Zekrom separated tells of twin heroes who founded Unova together, working in perfect harmony until their philosophical differences became irreconcilable. One hero valued ideals and the pursuit of how things should be, while the other valued truth and acceptance of how things actually are. Their arguments split the single dragon that served them into two beings, each one embodying the philosophy of its chosen hero. Reshiram followed the hero of ideals, while Zekrom accompanied the hero of truth, and the two dragons battled across Unova until both heroes realized that neither ideal nor truth alone could create a perfect world. Zekrom champions truth and reality, accepting the world as it exists rather than chasing impossible ideals. This dragon and electric type will destroy anyone who tries to build a world on ideals without acknowledging harsh truths, using its electrical power to shatter false hope and reveal reality. Its signature move, Bolt Strike, strikes with the force of lightning, powerful enough to level mountains, demonstrating the devastating power of truth when it crashes through carefully constructed illusions. Legends say Zekrom appears to those who seek to change the world through force and determination, offering its power to heroes who accept reality's harshness and work within it rather than denying it. The relationship between Reshiram and Zekrom isn't truly adversarial, despite their opposing natures, as both recognize that ideals and truth must coexist for the world to function properly. Pure idealism without truth becomes fantasy and delusion, while pure truth without ideals becomes cynicism and stagnation. The two dragons represent necessary balance, and the games encourage players to recognize that both philosophies have value. Black version gives the player Reshiram after choosing to pursue truth, while white version provides Zekrom after dedicating yourself to ideals, creating a deliberate reversal that emphasizes how truth and ideals intertwine and depend on each other. Kyurem represents what remained after Reshiram and Zekrom split apart, an incomplete dragon and ice type that seeks to reunite with its missing parts. The boundary Pokemon leaks cold energy constantly because its internal fire has been extinguished, creating a frozen wasteland around its lair in the giant chasm. Its body appears damaged and incomplete, with icy protrusions growing from wounds that never healed after the separation. Ancient texts describe Kyurem as the empty husk left behind when ideals and truth went their separate ways, suggesting that without both philosophies working together, only emptiness remains. Black Kyurem and White Kyurem represent partial reunification with Zekrom or Reshiram respectively, using the DNA splicers to forcibly merge Kyurem with one of its missing pieces. These fusion forms possess incredible power, combining Kyurem's ice with either Zekrom's electricity or Reshiram's flames to create devastating dual-type attacks. Black Kyurem gains freeze shock, charging electrical energy before releasing it in a blast that may paralyze the target. White Kyurem wields ice burn, wrapping flames in ice before unleashing them in an attack that may burn opponents. Both forms hint at what the original dragon must have been like before its separation, though even combined, they remain incomplete without all three parts unified. The legend speaks of an original dragon that may one day reunite, combining Kyurem, Reshiram, and Zekrom into a single being of unimaginable power. This theoretical fusion would represent the perfect balance of ideals, truth, and the completeness that comes from accepting both philosophies equally. Game files from Generation 5 contained hints of this complete form, though it has never been officially released or confirmed. The idea of this ultimate dragon fascinates players because it represents the resolution of the ideals versus truth conflict, a being that embodies both philosophies in perfect harmony. The Swords of Justice consist of Cobalion, Terrakion, Virizion, and their student Keldeo, a quartet of fighting types based on the Three Musketeers. These four protected Pokemon during a war between humans, fighting to save innocent lives, caught in the crossfire of a conflict they had no part in creating. The Swords of Justice traveled across Unova, rescuing Pokemon from burning forests and destroyed habitats, their noble actions earning them legendary status among those they saved. Each one possesses incredible fighting skill, combined with a strong sense of justice, making them formidable opponents to anyone who threatens the innocent. Cobalion leads the Swords of Justice as a steel and fighting type, whose heart and body both possess the hardness of metal. The Iron Will Pokemon holds itself to the highest standards of honor, never backing down from a fight, but also never striking without cause. Its signature ability, Justified, increases its attack when hit by Dark-type moves, reflecting how adversity and injustice fuel its determination to protect the weak. Ancient stories describe Cobalion as the one who organized the rescue efforts during the Human War, coordinating the other Swords of Justice and ensuring they saved as many Pokemon as possible. Terrakion charges forward with the unstoppable force of a rock and fighting type that can smash through castle walls as if they were paper. The Cavern Pokemon dedicated itself to protecting Pokemon whose homes were destroyed in the war, using its tremendous strength to clear rubble and create safe paths through dangerous territory. Legends say that Terrakion once brought down an entire castle to save the Pokemon trapped inside, demonstrating that sometimes destruction serves a noble purpose when used to protect innocent lives. Its raw power makes it the strongest physically among the Swords of Justice, able to overcome obstacles through sheer force where others might need more subtle approaches. Virizion moves with the grace of a grass and fighting type that can cross battlefields without leaving a single footprint in the soil. The Grassland Pokemon protected Pokemon during the war by using its speed and agility to outmaneuver human forces, leading refugees to safety through routes no army could follow. Stories describe how Virizion could pass through enemy lines undetected, its movements so swift and silent that by the time guards realized something had moved past them, dozens of Pokemon had already escaped to freedom. Its combination of speed and fighting skill makes it incredibly difficult to pin down in battle, able to strike and retreat before opponents can retaliate. Keldeo trained under the three senior Swords of Justice, learning combat and honor's honor from the Chayanita, masters who protected Pokemon during the war. This water and fighting type earned its place among the Swords of Justice by proving its resolve and dedication to protecting the innocent, though it remains the youngest and most impulsive of the group. Its signature move, Secret Sword, changes from special to physical based on which deals more damage to the target, reflecting Keldeo's adaptive fighting style. The Colt Pokemon's horn grows stronger as it gains experience, eventually allowing it to transform into its resolute form once it masters Sacred Sword, the signature move shared by all the swords of justice. Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus form the forces of nature, three Pokemon based on Japanese wind deities that control weather phenomena across Unova. These three caused tremendous destruction, with their conflicts battling each other across the region and leaving devastation in their wake. Tornadus whips up violent windstorms, Thundurus calls down lightning and thunder, and Landorus brings fertility to land when appeased, but devastation when angered. Together, they represent the chaotic and powerful forces of nature that humans cannot control, only attempt to survive and adapt to. Tornadus flies as a pure flying type, the only Pokemon with this typing in its generation. The Cyclone Pokemon generates powerful windstorms by spinning its tail, creating tornadoes that can level entire forests in minutes. Its incarnate form appears as a muscular genie-like being surrounded by clouds, while its Therian form transforms it into a large bird that better represents its connection to wind and sky. Ancient myths describe Tornadus as the source of all storms, traveling the world to bring both destructive tempests and the life-giving rains crops need to grow. Thundurus crashes across the sky as an electric and flying type that launches thunderbolts from the spikes on its tail. The Bolt Strike. Pokemon causes forest fires with its lightning, though whether this destruction is intentional or simply collateral damage from its battles with Tornadus remains unclear. Its incarnate form resembles a blue version of Tornadus, while its Therian form becomes a dragon-like creature with electricity crackling across its body. Legends claim that the sound of thunder announces Thundurus's presence, giving people a brief warning to seek shelter before lightning begins raining down. Landorus mediates between Tornadus and Thundurus as a ground and flying type that punishes them for the destruction they cause. The Abundance Pokemon brings fertility to soil with the energy it releases, causing crops to grow abundantly in fields it visits. Its incarnate form appears as an orange genie, similar to its siblings, while its Therian form transforms it into a powerful tiger-like beast. Ancient agricultural communities worshipped Landorus as a deity of harvest, building shrines to earn its favor and ensure bountiful crops. When Tornadus and Thundurus begin fighting, Landorus appears to stop them, using its power over Earth to ground their aerial battles and force peace. The reveal glass allows the forces of nature to transform between their incarnate and Therian forms, drastically changing their appearances and stat distributions. Therian form generally proves more useful in competitive play, with better stat arrangements that emphasize their strengths. The existence of these two forms suggests that the forces of nature may not be showing their true appearances in incarnate form, instead adopting humanoid shapes to interact with humans more easily. Therian form might represent their actual nature, primal forces given physical shape. Meloetta shifts between two forms based on whether it's singing or dancing, a normal and psychic type that becomes normal and fighting type when performing. The melody Pokemon's song can control the emotions of anyone who hears it, making people feel joy, sorrow, anger, or any emotion Meloetta chooses to evoke. Its signature move, Relic Song, changes Meloetta between aria form and pirouette form while damaging opponents and possibly putting them to sleep. Ancient civilizations composed songs specifically to please Meloetta, hoping to earn its blessing and the emotional harmony its music provides. Ariaforme focuses on special attack and special defense, making Meloetta a bulky special attacker that can take hits while dealing consistent damage. Its singing echoes with psychic energy, manipulating minds and hearts through melodies that bypass rational thought to strike directly at emotions. This form appears delicate and elegant, with flowing hair that resembles musical notation and a dress-like lower body that emphasizes its feminine design. The songs it sings in this form can calm violent storms and soothe savage beasts, demonstrating music's power to bring peace and understanding. Pirouette form transforms Meloetta into a physical attacker with significantly higher attack and speed, making it better suited for quick, powerful strikes. Its dancing channels fighting energy through graceful movements, each step and spin carrying enough force to shatter boulders. This form appears more active and dynamic, with its hair forming a ponytail and its lower body dividing into legs ready for combat. The dances it performs can inspire warriors to greater heights of courage and skill, though the same movements used offensively become devastating martial arts techniques that few opponents can withstand. Genesect represents the ultimate fusion of ancient power and modern technology, a bug and steel type created when Team Plasma found a fossil of an ancient Pokémon and enhanced it with cybernetic modifications. The Paleozoic Pokémon existed 300 million years ago as a powerful hunter, the most feared predator of its era. Team Plasma resurrected this creature and attached a cannon to its back, transforming it into a weapon capable of firing different types of energy, depending on which drive cassette it holds. This horrifying combination of prehistoric predator and modern warfare technology makes Genesect a being that should not exist, caught between two eras and truly belonging to neither. The morality of Genesect's creation raises disturbing questions about science's responsibility when resurrecting and modifying extinct species. Team Plasma didn't simply bring back an ancient Pokémon, they fundamentally altered its nature by adding weapons and technology it never evolved to possess. The result is a creature torn between its natural instincts as a hunter and its programming as a weapon, unable to fully embrace either identity. This internal conflict makes Genesect tragic despite its power, a victim of scientific hubris that cared more about what it could create than whether it should. The Technoblast move fires energy from the cannon attached to Genesect's back, changing type based on which drive is loaded into its systems. The shock drive makes it electric, the burn drive converts it to fire, the chill drive transforms it to ice, and the douse drive shifts it to water. This versatility makes Genesect incredibly dangerous, able to adapt its offense to exploit weaknesses in any opponent. The fact that such power came from human modification rather than natural evolution emphasizes the dangerous potential of technology used without ethical constraints. Generation 6 introduced legendary Pokémon tied to life and death, massive beings that represent the fundamental cycle all living things must eventually face. Xerneas and Yveltal embody these opposing forces, a fairy type that gives life and a dark and flying type that takes it away. Their eternal conflict maintains balance in the Kalos region, with neither able to permanently overcome the other. When one grows too powerful, the other awakens to restore equilibrium, ensuring that neither endless life nor total death can dominate the world. Xerneas radiates life energy from its enormous antlers, bringing vitality and growth to everything within range. The life Pokémon can grant immortality to living beings, though whether this blessing or curse depends entirely on perspective and circumstance. Its signature move, Geomancy, charges up power over one turn before drastically boosting special attack, special defense, and speed, allowing Xerneas to become a devastating sweeper. When Xerneas sleeps, it transforms into a tree and enters a dormant state that can last for centuries, waiting until life needs defending before awakening once more. The legend of Xerneas describes how it appears at the end of wars, using its power to heal the wounded and restore devastated lands to their former beauty. This connection to post-conflict recovery makes Xerneas a symbol of hope and renewal, proof that even the most terrible destruction can eventually give way to new growth. The 8 horns on its antlers glow with different colors representing the 8 types it can use geomancy to boost itself with, emphasizing its connection to the rainbow and the full spectrum of life's possibilities. Iviltal drains life force from everything around it when its life reaches its end, absorbing the vitality of plants, animals, and even the earth itself. The destruction. Pokemon transforms into a cocoon after stealing all available life energy, entering a sleep that lasts until enough life has regenerated for it to feed again. Its signature move, Oblivion Wing, drains health from targets to heal Eviltal, reflecting its vampiric nature. Ancient Kalos myths describe Eviltal's awakening as a catastrophic event that turns forests into deserts and empties entire regions of life, leaving only barren wastelands where thriving ecosystems once flourished. The balance between Xerneas and Yveltal prevents either life or death from overwhelming the world, creating a cycle that allows existence to continue. Too much life without death would lead to overpopulation, resource depletion, and eventual collapse. Too much death without new life would create a sterile universe where nothing could ever grow or change. Their opposing natures serve a necessary purpose, and both are equally essential to maintaining the world's balance. This philosophical depth makes them more than simple good and evil representations, instead presenting them as 2 halves of a complete whole. Zygarde monitors the ecosystem as a dragon and ground type that exists in multiple forms, ranging from a single cell to a complete kaiju-like giant. The Order Pokemon consists of many separate cells and cores that can combine into different configurations depending on how much power the current situation requires. 10% form appears as a small dog-like creature with a fraction of Zygarde's full power. 50% form manifests as a serpent representing half of Zygarde's available cells. Complete form assembles every cell and core into a massive humanoid warrior when the ecosystem faces catastrophic threats. This modular nature allows Zygarde to respond proportionally to problems, using only as much power as needed to resolve issues. The cells and cores that make up Zygarde exist separately across the Kalos region, monitoring the environment from countless locations simultaneously. When they detect imbalances or threats to the ecosystem, they begin gathering together to form larger constructs capable of addressing the problem. This distributed consciousness means Zygarde sees everything happening across the region at once, processing information from hundreds of viewpoints to understand threats in their full context. The ability to split apart and reform makes Zygarde nearly impossible to permanently defeat, as destroying one form simply causes the cells to scatter and eventually recombine. The signature move, Land's Wrath, calls upon the Earth itself to attack opponents, creating seismic shocks that devastate everything in range. Complete form gains Core, Enforcer, an attack that suppresses opponents' abilities after they've acted that turn, effectively shutting down ability-dependent strategies. These moves emphasize Zygarde's role as a guardian of natural order, using the Earth's own power to eliminate threats and enforce balance. When Xerneas and Yveltal's conflict grows too extreme, Zygarde intervenes to stop them, ensuring their battle doesn't tear Kalos apart. Another quiet detail appears when we look closer at Generation 7, which introduced legendary Pokémon tied to the sun and moon, celestial bodies that govern day and night cycles. Solgaleo and Lunala embody these cosmic forces, massive beings that traveled to Alola from other dimensions through ultra wormholes. Their presence in Alola created new myths and legends, with the ancient people worshipping them as emissaries of the sun and moon, despite their true extra-dimensional origins. Solgaleo radiates light so intense it can turn night into day, a psychic and steel type that embodies the sun's majesty and power. The Sune Pokemon absorbs light energy constantly, storing it within its body until it blazes like a living star. Its signature move, Sunsteel Strike, charges forward with the force and heat of a solar flare, ignoring abilities that would normally block or reduce the damage. Ancient Alolan texts describe Solgaleo as a messenger from another world, bringing the sun's blessing to a region that needed its light. The third eye on its forehead opens when using its full power, releasing stored solar energy in devastating displays. Lunala absorbs light instead of creating it, a psychic and ghost type that embodies the moon's mysterious and subtle nature. The moon Pokemon spreads its wings to create portals into other dimensions, using the darkness between worlds as doorways it can open at will. Its signature move, Moongeist Beam, fires spectral energy that ignores abilities, striking with the pale cold light of a full moon. Legends say Lunala guides lost souls to their final rest, using its power over dimensions to escort the dead from the mortal realm to whatever lies beyond. The crescent patterns across its wings glow with captured starlight, creating an effect like viewing the night sky through its translucent membranes. The relationship between Solgaleo and Lunala reflects not opposition, but complementary cycles, day and night working together to create the passage of time. Unlike Reshiram and Zekrom or Xerneas and Yveltal, these two don't conflict but instead represent different phases of the same eternal rhythm. When Solgaleo's day ends, Lunala's night begins, and the cycle continues forever. This harmonious relationship makes them feel less adversarial and more like partners in maintaining cosmic order, each one essential to the other's purpose. Cosmog represents the larval form of both Solgaleo and Lunala, a tiny psychic type said to have come from another world entirely. The Nebula Pokemon is curious and playful, despite its tremendous potential, completely unaware that it will one day transform into a legendary Pokemon of incredible power. Its body consists of gaseous material too diffuse to touch properly, and it floats through the air leaving trails of glittering particles. Ancient Alolan kings treasured Cosmog as sacred beings, protecting them despite not understanding their true nature or potential. Cosmoem appears when Cosmog evolves, transforming from a nebulous gas into an incredibly dense core wrapped in a golden shell. The Protostar Pokemon weighs 999.9 kilograms, despite its tiny size, making it the densest known Pokemon in existence. It cannot move or act during this stage, simply floating in place as it absorbs the energy and prepares for its final evolution. The shell protecting Cosmoem's core is completely impenetrable, with ancient texts describing how nothing could damage or even dent its surface. This dormant state represents the chrysalis phase before it emerges as either Solgaleo or Lunala, depending on which game version triggers the evolution. The Ultra Beasts exist as creatures from dimensions beyond our own, brought to Alola through ultra wormholes that tear holes in reality. These beings share several characteristics that mark them as fundamentally different from normal Pokemon, including their ability, Beast Boost, which raises their highest stat whenever they defeat an opponent. Each Ultra Beast comes from its own unique world with environmental conditions radically different from anything on Earth, making them poorly adapted to survive in Alola's ecosystem. Their presence creates danger, not through malice, but through simple incompatibility, as they desperately search for ways to return home or adapt to their new environment. Nihiligo drifts through the air as a rock and poison type, that resembles a parasitic jellyfish made of glass. The parasite Pokemon can take over the minds and bodies of humans and Pokemon, injecting neurotoxins that cause its victims to act on their basest impulses without restraint or conscience. Its true nature remains mysterious, as scientists cannot determine whether it counts as a living organism or simply a colony of cells operating with hive mind intelligence. The case of Luthamine's corruption by Nihiligo demonstrates the horrifying potential of this ultra beast, showing how it can transform even strong willed individuals into puppet like shells acting out their darkest desires. Buzzwole flexes its enormous muscles constantly, an incredibly powerful bug. These are the legendary Pokemon, and their stories reach back to the very beginning of everything we know. Some were born from the void before time itself existed, while others emerged from the desperate ambitions of those who sought to control what should never be controlled. Each one carries with it a weight of history, a purpose woven into the fabric of existence itself. We will travel slowly through every region, pausing in the quiet spaces between facts to let the stories settle around us like evening mist. From Kanto's frozen caves, where ice crystallizes in impossible patterns, to Paldea's deepest crater, where time moves differently than anywhere else, we will trace the paths these beings have carved through legend and reality alike. In the vastness of the Pokemon world, not every extraordinary being occupies the same space in our understanding. There exists a subtle distinction, one that separates those who are woven into the very structure of regional history from those who exist just beyond the edges of what can be proven. The legendary Pokemon stand at the center of creation stories, their names spoken in every village, their presence shaping the way entire civilizations developed over thousands of years. Mythical Pokemon, however, dwell in a different realm altogether. They are whispered about in voices that grow quiet when strangers approach, creatures whose existence some believe in with absolute certainty, while others dismiss as elaborate folklore. Their appearances are so rare that generations pass without a single confirmed sighting, and yet the stories persist, passed down through families like precious heirlooms. As we drift a little deeper tonight, consider how these categories blur at their edges. A legendary Pokemon in one region might be considered mythical in another, known only through ancient texts that few bother to read anymore. The difference often lies not in the creatures themselves, but in how deeply their stories have embedded themselves in the collective memory of the people who live alongside them. The legendary birds of Kanto, for instance, have been seen by enough trainers over the decades that their existence cannot be reasonably doubted. They appear in weather patterns, leave the physical traces of their passage, and occasionally reveal themselves to those who venture into their territories with the right combination of respect and determination. But even these well-documented beings maintain an air of mystery, choosing when and where they appear according to logic that remains unknowable to most. Mythical Pokemon, by contrast, might be encountered only once in a trainer's entire lifetime, if at all. They manifest during specific conditions, vanish without explanation, and leave behind only the faintest evidence of their presence. Some researchers spend decades pursuing a single confirmed sighting, following rumors across continents, only to come away with nothing more than secondhand accounts and ambiguous photographs. The story must begin somewhere, and so we return to Kanto, where the franchise itself first took root in the collective imagination of a generation. This region, with its mixture of urban sprawl and wild landscapes, holds within it the seeds of everything that would come after. Here, in laboratories and mountain caves, on windswept islands, and in the deepest forests, the first legendary Pokemon made themselves known. Before we continue, maybe tap subscribe for more calming videos, and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Long before trainers walked the routes between cities, long before anyone thought to categorize and study these beings systematically, Mew existed in the jungles far from civilization. The researchers who discovered it in Guyana could never have imagined what their find would eventually lead to. Here was a creature whose genetic code seemed to contain echoes of every other Pokemon, as though it stood at the root of an evolutionary tree so vast that its branches reached into every ecosystem on the planet. The implications stretched beyond simple biology. If Mew truly represented a common ancestor, then the diversity of Pokemon life itself became something that could be traced backward, followed like a thread through the tangled history of the natural world. But Mew itself offered no explanations, no convenient answers to the questions its existence raised. Those who encountered it described a playful being, curious and gentle, with psychic abilities that manifested in ways that seemed almost whimsical. It would vanish mid conversation, reappear on the other side of a clearing, transform its shape into that of other Pokemon with apparently no effort whatsoever. This was not a creature that operated according to rules anyone understood. Slowly, the story widens to encompass what came after that discovery. The scientific community, confronted with evidence of such extraordinary genetic potential, could not resist the temptation to experiment, to push boundaries, to see what might be possible if human ingenuity could harness what nature had created over eons. In a laboratory on Cinnabar Island, surrounded by volcanic stone and the constant sound of waves against cliffs, something unprecedented began to take shape. The scientists working there had obtained genetic material from Mew, fragments of DNA that they believed could be enhanced, refined, improved upon. They envisioned creating the ultimate Pokemon, one that would possess all of Mew's potential, but amplified, focused, made more powerful through careful manipulation. The journals left behind in the abandoned mansion tell a story of gradual escalation. Early entries speak of excitement, of breakthrough after breakthrough as cells divided and grew according to plan. The scientists saw themselves as pioneers, pushing into territory where no one had ventured before. They documented everything meticulously, convinced that future generations would study their work as a turning point in humanity's understanding of Pokemon. But the tone in those journals shifts as the project progresses. There are mentions of unexpected complications, of a consciousness emerging faster and with more intensity than anticipated. The creature they were creating began to exhibit awareness before its physical form had fully stabilized, and that awareness was accompanied by something the scientists had not planned for: questions about its own existence, about the nature of its creation, about why it had been brought into being. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, not because they ended well, but because they remind us that even the most carefully laid plans can unravel when we forget to consider what we are actually creating. Mewtwo was not simply a more powerful version of Mew, it was something entirely new, a being with its own thoughts, its own will, its own growing sense of identity and purpose. The final entries in those journals speak of power beyond control, of psychic abilities that overwhelmed every containment system the scientists had devised. Mewtwo destroyed the laboratory and everyone in it, not out of malice necessarily, but because it could not tolerate remaining imprisoned in a place where its only purpose was to serve as an experiment. It fled into the unknown reaches of Cerulean Cave, where it remained for years, wrestling with questions about identity and belonging that no Pokemon before it had ever needed to confront. While Mewtwo's story unfolded in secret, three other legendary beings moved through Kanto's skies and peaks, embodying forces that had existed long before humans arrived to name and categorize them. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres represent something primal about the world itself: the elemental powers that shape weather, that determine whether crops flourish or fail, that can bring either life giving rain or destructive storms. Articuno dwells in frozen places where few dare to venture. The Seafoam Islands, with their labyrinthine caves and treacherous ice flows, provide exactly the kind of environment where this legendary bird feels most at home. Those who have glimpsed it describe wings that trail crystalline frost in their wake, a presence that seems to lower the temperature of everything nearby, and eyes that hold intelligence, ancient and patient. The bird does not create winter single handedly, but its movements through certain regions often coincide with unusual cold snaps, with blizzards that arrive without warning and blanket entire valleys in snow. It is both a herald and an embodiment of ice itself, and the Pokemon that naturally inhabit frozen environments seem to show it a kind of reverence, moving aside when it passes overhead. Zapdos presents a stark contrast, crackling with electrical energy that makes the air itself hum with tension. The abandoned power plant, where trainers sometimes encounter it, seems almost laughably inadequate as a dwelling place for such a being. Electrical equipment sparks and fails in its presence, circuits overload without explanation, and thunderstorms gather overhead even on days when the forecast called for clear skies. There are accounts from ship captains who have seen it flying through storm clouds far out at sea, each beat of its wings accompanied by branching lightning that illuminates the darkness for miles in every direction. It does not cause every thunderstorm, but there seems to be a connection between its movements and the most powerful electrical disturbances that sweep across the region. As we drift a little deeper tonight, we come to Moltres, the flame Pokemon that makes its home in the volcanic heart of Victory Road. Here, where trainers must navigate through the final challenges before reaching the Pokemon League, this legendary bird roosts among rivers of lava and chambers filled with superheated air. Its feathers glow with their own internal heat, and its cry echoes through stone corridors like the roar of a furnace. Moltres embodies not just fire, but the concept of renewal that fire represents. Forests that burn make way for new growth. Volcanic soil produces the richest farmland, and the heat of summer follows the cold of winter in an endless cycle. This bird exists at the heart of that cycle, neither creating it nor controlling it entirely, but serving as its living representation. The three birds together form a kind of equilibrium. When one becomes too active, when ice spreads too far, or storms rage too frequently, the others seem to respond, re-establishing balance through their mere presence. It is not cooperation in any deliberate sense, but rather a natural regulation that occurs because these three legendary beings exist in relation to one another. Our journey carries us westward now, into Johto, a region where ancient and modern exist side by side in ways that feel more pronounced than elsewhere. Here, traditions run deeper, and the connection between people and legendary Pokemon has been maintained through centuries of careful stewardship and respect. The stories here feel older somehow, less shaped by recent events, more rooted in a time when the boundaries between the human and Pokemon worlds were less clearly defined. In Ekritique City, two towers once stood as monuments to this connection. The Brass Tower and the Bell Tower rose into the sky, each one a testament to the bond between humanity and the legendary birds that made their home in Johto's skies. But where Kanto's legendary birds embody raw, elemental power, Johto's legends speak to something different: the cycle of life and death, the possibility of rebirth, and the terrible consequences of breaking sacred bonds. The towers themselves represented architectural achievements that modern builders struggle to replicate. Each stone was cut to precise specifications and fit together without mortar, held in place through engineering genius and possibly through something more mystical. The brass tower gleamed in sunlight, its metal components reflecting light in patterns that changed throughout the day, creating an ever shifting display that observers found mesmerizing. The bell tower, constructed primarily of wood and traditional materials, contained massive bells whose tones could be heard across the entire region when rung. These bells served both practical and ceremonial purposes, marking important moments in the community's calendar and summoning people to gatherings when decisions affecting everyone needed to be made. 3 centuries before our time, before any living trainer can remember, a lightning strike set the brass tower ablaze. The fire consumed everything, burning so hot and so fast that no amount of water could extinguish it. 3 Pokemon perished in that conflagration, ordinary Pokemon by most accounts, but ones who had dwelled in the tower for so long that they had become part of its spiritual foundation. The circumstances surrounding that fire remain unclear even now. Some accounts suggest the lightning came from a storm that appeared without warning on an otherwise clear day. Other versions speak of tensions within Ekritique City, conflicts between factions that might have led to sabotage. Still others whisper about curses, about warnings ignored, about hubris that invited divine punishment. What is certain is that the fire started at the tower's pinnacle and spread downward with unnatural speed. Witnesses described flames that seemed to burn in colors fire should not possess, heat so intense that people hundreds of feet away felt their skin blister. The metal components of the tower melted and ran like water, pooling at the structure's base in grotesque formations that cooled into shapes suggesting anguish and suffering. Rescue attempts proved futile. Those who tried to enter the burning tower were driven back by heat and smoke, while aerial approaches failed because flying Pokemon refused to venture near the flames. It was as if the fire itself possessed malevolent intelligence, actively preventing interference with its destructive purpose. The 3 Pokemon who perished were not legendary beings, but they were beloved by the community. They had lived in the tower for generations, tended by priests who maintained the sacred spaces where humans and Pokemon could meet in peaceful coexistence. Their loss represented more than simple death. It felt like a rupture in the natural order, a breaking of bonds that should have been inviolable. What happened next transformed Johto's understanding of death itself. From the ashes of that tragedy, 3 new legendary Pokemon emerged, their birth witnessed by hundreds of people who had gathered to mourn the tower's destruction. Ho-Oh, the Rainbow Guardian, who had roosted atop the brass tower for centuries, descended through smoke and ash, its presence bringing with it winds that temporarily cleared the air. The legendary bird cried out in a voice that resonated with power beyond sound, and where its tears fell onto the ashes, energy began to gather. Light coalesced into 3 distinct forms, growing brighter and more solid, until 3 entirely new beings stood where moments before only death and destruction had existed. Raikou, Entei, and Suicune rose from the ruins, resurrected by Ho-Oh's power in an act of creation that witnesses struggled to comprehend. These 3 beasts, as they came to be called, embodied the very forces that had destroyed them: lightning that had sparked the fire, flames that had consumed the tower, and water that had failed to save it. The transformation was not simply resurrection, but transfiguration. The Pokemon who emerged from Ho-Oh's blessing bore little resemblance to those who had perished. They were larger, more powerful, infused with abilities that elevated them to legendary status. Their very existence challenged conventional understanding of what death meant and whether it could ever be truly permanent. Raikou roams the land with restless energy, appearing during thunderstorms, as if drawn to the electricity that fills the air. Its presence brings sudden downpours that last for hours, rain falling so heavily that visibility drops to mere feet, and rivers overflow their banks within minutes. Those who encounter it describe feeling the hair on their arms stand on end, the air charged with so much static that every surface they touch delivers a small shock. The legendary beast moves with speed that defies normal perception, covering miles in seconds, appearing and vanishing so quickly that witnesses often question whether they truly saw it or merely imagined its presence. This incredible velocity serves practical purposes. Raikou can reach any point in Johto within minutes of sensing a disturbance, allowing it to intervene in situations where timing matters. But this constant motion also suggests something deeper, a restlessness that might stem from the traumatic nature of its resurrection. Raikou never seems to settle anywhere for long, never allows itself the luxury of rest or relaxation. It is always moving, always searching, though what it searches for remains unclear even to those who have studied its patterns for decades. Some researchers theorize that Raikou seeks understanding of its own nature, trying to reconcile memories of its previous existence with the reality of what it has become. Others suggest it is drawn to storms, not just by affinity for electricity, but by some unconscious desire to return to the moment of its death and rebirth, to relive that transformation in hopes of finding meaning in it. Entei appears less frequently, but with no less impact. This legendary beast is said to be born anew with each volcano that erupts anywhere in the world, as if the destruction itself calls forth Entei's essence and gives it form. Whether this means multiple Enteis exist simultaneously, or whether a single Entei teleports between eruption sites remains subject to debate among scholars who track its appearances. Its passage leaves scorched earth behind, not from malice but simply from the sheer heat that radiates from its body. Grass wilts and turns brown before Entei draws near, leaves curl and crumble to ash as it passes, and the ground itself cracks beneath its paws as moisture evaporates from soil that moments earlier was damp and fertile. The heat Entei generates serves purposes beyond simple destruction. In volcanic regions where it appears, the legendary beast's presence can redirect lava flows, channeling destructive force away from populated areas and toward paths where it will cause less harm. This protective aspect of its nature suggests that Entei, despite being born from destruction, has taken upon itself a guardian role that prioritizes prevention of catastrophe. Witnesses who have seen Entei describe it as moving with purpose and dignity, each step deliberate, each decision seemingly made after careful consideration. This contrasts sharply with Raikou's frantic energy, suggesting that while both legendary beasts emerged from the same tragedy, they processed that experience in fundamentally different ways. Before we move deeper, maybe tap subscribe for more relaxing videos, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. Suicune stands apart from its companions in temperament and purpose. Where Raikou and Entei embody violence and raw power, elements that destroy before they can build, Suicune represents purification, the cleansing force of water that washes away corruption and restores balance. It seeks out polluted lakes and rivers, and where it touches the water, impurities dissolve and clarity returns. This healing ability operates on both physical and spiritual levels. Contaminated water becomes safe to drink within minutes of Suicune's intervention, toxins breaking down into harmless components through processes that chemistry cannot adequately explain. But beyond removing physical pollutants, Suicune's presence seems to cleanse to something more subtle, an emotional or spiritual taint that accumulates in places where suffering has occurred. Communities living near water sources that Suicune has visited report changes that extend beyond improved water quality. People describe feeling lighter, as if burdens they had carried for years suddenly became easier to bear. Old grudges lose their intensity, long-standing conflicts seem less worth maintaining, and a general sense of peace settles over the area for weeks after the legendary beast's departure. Suicune moves with grace that borders on the supernatural, its paws barely touching the ground as it runs, its crystalline mane flowing behind it in patterns that seem to defy wind and gravity. It can cross water surfaces without sinking, can leap distances that should be impossible given its size and weight, and can vanish into mist so completely that even experienced trackers lose its trail within seconds. The three beasts do not travel together, instead moving independently across the region as if following routes that only they can perceive. Occasionally, trainers report seeing two or even all three in the same general area, but never close enough to interact directly. It is as if an invisible boundary keeps them separated, as if their very natures prevent them from occupying the same space for too long. This separation might stem from the circumstances of their resurrection. They were created simultaneously from a single act of divine intervention, but they were created as distinct beings with different purposes. Forcing them to remain together might undermine those individual purposes, might create conflicts between their natures that would prevent any of them from functioning optimally. Or perhaps the separation is self imposed, each legendary beast choosing isolation because proximity to the others triggers memories of trauma they would prefer to leave dormant. They died together, were resurrected together, but that shared experience might have created bonds they find painful to acknowledge, connections that remind them of what they lost when their previous forms ceased to exist. Ancient texts, preserved in Akritique's libraries, speak of rituals that were performed in the brass tower before its destruction, ceremonies that required coordination between the three Pokemon who would eventually become the legendary beasts. These rituals supposedly maintained harmony between competing forces in nature, preventing any single element from dominating to the point where balance collapsed. When the tower burned and those rituals could no longer be performed, observers noted changes in Johto's weather patterns. Storms became more severe and less predictable, droughts lasted longer than historical records suggested they should, and the transition between seasons grew more abrupt and jarring. Some attributed these changes to the loss of the tower itself, while others believed the disruption stemmed from the three Pokemon's deaths. The legendary beast's resurrection may have restored some of what was lost, but in transformed fashion. Where the original rituals required conscious cooperation between three beings working in concert, the legendary beasts now maintain balance. Through their independent actions, each one addressing problems in its own way without needing to coordinate with the others. This represents either elegant efficiency or tragic fragmentation, depending on perspective. The balance is maintained either way, but something of the unity that existed before the fire has been permanently lost, replaced by a system that functions adequately but lacks the grace and harmony of the original arrangement. Above Johto's legends of resurrection and purification fly two beings whose scale and power dwarf even the legendary beasts. Ho-Oh and Lugia represent something beyond mere elemental control or regional guardianship. These birds, if the word bird even adequately describes what they are, embody fundamental aspects of existence itself, the glory of the rising sun and the mystery of ocean depths, the rainbow and the storm, creation and protection. Ho-Oh appears in the sky like a sunrise given form, its feathers radiating every color of the spectrum, each one catching light and transforming it into brilliance that can be seen for miles. The legendary bird does not simply reflect light, but generates it, each feather functioning as a tiny prism that splits and recombines wavelengths into patterns that should not exist according to conventional optics. Legend says that anyone who sees Ho-Oh is blessed with eternal happiness, though what that means in practical terms remains unclear. Those who claim to have witnessed the legendary bird describe the experience as transcendent, a moment when all worries and anxieties fell away, replaced by profound contentment that lasted long after Ho-Oh vanished from view. But skeptics point out that reports of sightings often come from people experiencing difficult circumstances, suggesting that the blessing might be psychological rather than supernatural. Perhaps seeing something so magnificent allows people to gain perspective on their problems, to recognize that their immediate concerns matter less than they thought when viewed against the backdrop of something so much greater than themselves. What is certain is that Ho-Oh carries with it a sense of hope, of renewal, of the endless possibility that each new day represents. Its presence feels like permission to start over, to leave behind mistakes and regrets, to believe that better futures remain achievable regardless of past failures. The tower where Ho-Oh was once said to roost, the bell tower, still stands in Ekritique City as a sacred site. Only those who prove themselves worthy, who demonstrate not just strength, but also respect for the bond between humans and Pokemon, are permitted to climb to its summit. The proving process involves challenges that test a character more than combat ability, presenting moral dilemmas that lack clear right answers and observing how candidates navigate ambiguity. Those who fail these tests are not punished, but merely denied access to the tower's upper levels. They can try, again later, can work on developing the qualities they currently lack, can return when they believe they have grown enough to pass. This creates a system where access to Ho-Oh depends on genuine personal development rather than simple accumulation of power or political influence. And even then, Ho-Oh appears only when it chooses, following its own mysterious criteria for who deserves to witness its presence. Some people who complete the trials and reach the tower's summit never see Ho-Oh at all, while others report that the legendary bird appeared to them before they even began the formal testing, as if it sensed something in them that made verification of worthiness unnecessary. This unpredictability frustrates those who prefer systematic approaches to legendary Pokemon research. Ho-Oh cannot be summoned through any known ritual, cannot be predicted based on astronomical or meteorological conditions, and does not follow patterns that would allow researchers to anticipate its appearances. It manifests when it wishes, for reasons it does not explain, and vanishes again without offering any insight into why it came or when it might return. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. Lugia occupies a very different space in Johto's mythology. Where Ho-Oh soars above, visible and radiant, Lugia dwells in the depths, in underwater caverns so far from sunlight that darkness becomes absolute. This legendary bird, despite its association with flying, spends most of its time beneath the waves in the Whirl Islands, a cluster of rocky outcroppings surrounded by vicious currents and whirlpools that make approach nearly impossible. The Whirl Islands exist in a state of constant turbulence, water rushing between the rocky formations at speeds that can tear apart ships that venture too close. The currents follow no predictable pattern, shifting direction without warning, creating vortexes that appear and disappear seemingly at random. Navigation through these waters requires either extraordinary skill or extraordinary luck, and even experienced sailors avoid the area whenever possible. Beneath this chaos lies Lugia's sanctuary, a system of caves accessible only through underwater passages that require traversing currents strong enough to disorient or drown anyone attempting the journey. The caves themselves possess an eerie beauty, walls encrusted with minerals that reflect what little light penetrates the depths, creating subtle illumination that makes the space feel less oppressive than it otherwise would. The reason for Lugia's self imposed isolation lies in its power. A single flap of its wings can create storms that last for weeks, winds so powerful they can level entire forests, waves that swallow coastal villages. Such power cannot be unleashed carelessly, and so Lugia remains hidden, emerging only when absolutely necessary to prevent some greater catastrophe. There is something profoundly lonely about this arrangement, where Ho-Oh interacts with the world, blessing those who see it, and resurrecting Pokemon who die tragically. Lugia must maintain distance precisely because of how much it cares about preventing harm. Its protection takes the form of absence, of restraint, of choosing not to act even when action might seem appropriate. This self imposed exile affects Lugia psychologically in ways that researchers can only speculate about. Does the legendary bird resent its isolation? Does it long for the freedom that Ho-Oh enjoys, the ability to fly openly without worrying that every movement might trigger catastrophic weather events? Or has it made peace with its role, accepting loneliness as a necessary cost of ensuring that its power never causes the destruction it was meant to prevent? Ancient murals preserved in temples near the Whirl Islands depict Lugia and Ho-Oh together, the two legendary birds working in partnership to maintain balance in Johto. In these images, they appear as equals, neither subservient to the other, their powers complementary rather than competing. But modern observations rarely show them in proximity, suggesting that something changed over the centuries to drive them apart or at least to limit their interactions. Some scholars theorize that the Brass Tower's destruction affected Lugia as deeply as it affected Ho-Oh, but in opposite fashion. Where Ho-Oh responded by becoming more active, resurrecting the legendary beasts, and continuing to engage with the world, Lugia retreated further into isolation, perhaps fearing that its own power could cause similar tragedy if not kept under even stricter control. Others argue that Lugia and Ho-Oh represent philosophies that can coexist but cannot merge. Ho-Oh embodies intervention, the belief that legendary Pokemon should actively shape events to prevent suffering and promote well-being. Lugia represents restraint, the conviction that power must be withheld more often than it is used, that the greatest protection comes from ensuring that one's own abilities never become the source of harm they are meant to prevent. Both approaches have merit, and both have risks. Ho-Oh's active intervention successfully resurrected the legendary beasts, providing Johto with powerful guardians who protect the region to this day. But that same willingness to act boldly could lead to unintended consequences, to interventions that solve immediate problems while creating larger issues down the line. Lugia's restraint prevents it from causing storms that would devastate coastal communities and disrupt ecosystems. But that same caution might prevent it from acting in situations where its intervention could prevent suffering it has the power to stop. By choosing never to risk harm, Lugia guarantees it will never accidentally cause harm, but it also ensures it will never use its full power for beneficial purposes. The legendary birds do not debate these philosophical differences directly, at least not in ways humans can observe. They simply exist, each following its nature, each protecting Johto according to its own understanding of what protection means. And Johto benefits from both approaches, gaining guardians who between them cover the full spectrum from active intervention to careful restraint. In Ilex Forest, where ancient trees grow so close together that sunlight barely penetrates to the forest floor, another legendary being makes its home. Celebi exists slightly outside the normal flow of time, moving backward and forward through the years with apparent ease. appearing in one era and then vanishing only to resurface decades or centuries later without having aged a single day. This time, travel ability makes Celebi one of the most enigmatic legendary Pokemon. It can witness events across history, can see the consequences of actions before they occur, and potentially could alter the course of events by sharing knowledge from the future. And yet, despite this incredible power, Celebi seems content to remain in the forest, tending to plant life and ensuring that the ancient woods continue to thrive. The forest itself appears healthier in places where Celebi spends time. Plants grow more vigorously, flowers bloom out of season, and even damaged trees seem to recover more quickly. This healing presence extends to Pokemon as well. Those who are injured or ill often instinctively make their way toward the heart of Ilex Forest, as if drawn by something they cannot quite articulate. Celebi's role as a guardian takes on special significance when one considers its temporal nature. It does not just protect the forest as it exists in the present moment, it ensures that the forest has a future worth protecting. By moving through time, it can identify threats before they fully manifest and take subtle actions to prevent them from ever occurring. As we drift further through our journey tonight, we arrive in Hoenn, a region defined by the interplay between land and sea. Here, the legendary Pokemon do not merely influence their environments. They created those environments in the first place, shaping continents and oceans through cosmic battles that raged eons before humans existed to witness them. Groudon and Kyogre represent opposing forces taken to their absolute extremes. Groudon, the continent Pokemon, seeks to expand landmass, to raise new mountains from beneath the ocean, to dry out seas and create habitable ground. Its power over the Earth itself manifests as volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and the gradual uplift of tectonic plates. Every new island that emerges from the waves, every mountain range that forces its way skyward, echoes the primal drive that Groudon embodies. Kyogre, in contrast, works to expand the oceans, to reclaim land that Groudon has raised, to cover the world in water where marine life can flourish without constraint. Rain falls, constantly in its presence, not ordinary rain, but torrential downpours that transform rivers into raging floods and low-lying areas into inland seas. The ocean itself responds to Kyogre's will, tides rising higher than any lunar cycle could explain, currents shifting to follow its movements. These two legendary Pokemon cannot coexist peacefully. Their very natures put them into conflict, each one's success meaning the other's failure. And so they fought, thousands of years ago, in battles that reshaped Hoenn's geography entirely. Coastlines shifted by hundreds of miles in a single day. Islands sank beneath the waves only to rise again years later, and the delicate balance between habitable land and life-giving ocean teetered on the edge of total collapse. Slowly, the story widens to include the being who ended that conflict. High above the battling titans, Rayquaza descended from the ozone layer where it normally dwells, drawn by the disturbance to the world's equilibrium. This dragon Pokemon possesses power sufficient to subdue both Groudon and Kyogre simultaneously, not through superior force alone, but through its role as a mediator, a third force that maintains balance by preventing either extreme from dominating completely. Rayquaza's intervention did not destroy Groudon or Kyogre. Such beings cannot truly be destroyed. Instead, it forced them into a deep sleep, a dormancy so profound that their consciousness faded entirely, leaving only their physical forms locked away in hidden caverns where their power could not leak out and disrupt the surface world. Buried beneath Hoenn's surface lie secrets even older than Groudon and Kyogre's battles. In sealed chambers and accessible only by solving elaborate puzzles, three mysterious beings wait in stillness. Regis, Regirock, and Registeel represent something that feels almost artificial, as if they were constructed rather than born, designed by some intelligence for purposes that remain unclear. Each one consists of a single material. Regis's body is formed from ice, so ancient and so dense that it cannot melt even in volcanic heat. Regirock appears to be assembled from stones collected from different regions, its body a geological patchwork that shifts and reforms when damaged. Registeel gleams with a metallic sheen, its body composed of a metal that no known ore matches, harder than diamond and resistant to any form of corrosion. The patterns marked on their faces resemble ancient writing, dots and lines arranged in configurations that might be eyes or might be some form of communication. They move with deliberate slowness, each action seeming to require conscious thought, as if they must remember how their bodies function each time they wish to move. Legend speaks of a creator, another Pokemon named Regigigas, who brought these three into existence for reasons known only to itself. But Regigigas does not dwell in Hoenn, and the Regiguardians have long since been left to their own devices, maintaining their vigil over nothing in particular, waiting for a purpose that may no longer exist. Not all of Hoenn's legendary Pokemon operate on the scale of continent shapers and ocean creators. Latias and Latios, the Eon duo, exist at a more personal level, interacting with humans in ways that other legendaries rarely do. These dragon and psychic types can disguise themselves as humans through psychic projection, walking among people unnoticed, observing, and sometimes intervening when they perceive a need. Their ability to transform appearance stems from powerful psychic abilities that allow them to project images directly into the minds of those around them. When Latias walks through a crowded street, disguised as a human girl, what people actually see is a mental construct, carefully maintained and detailed enough to withstand casual scrutiny. Only those with particularly strong psychic sensitivity might notice something amiss, a slight shimmer around the edges, a momentary flicker when the disguise requires adjustment. Alto Mare, a city built on canals in a distant region, holds a special place in the story of these two Pokemon. There, Latias and Latios guarded an artifact of tremendous power, something called the Soul Dew, which maintained the city's protection and prosperity. The siblings shared a bond so deep that they could communicate without words, their thoughts intertwining in a psychic connection that made them almost one being in two bodies. The Soul Dew itself contains mysteries that researchers still struggle to understand. Some believe it is a crystallization of a previous Latios or Latias's essence, a way for these legendary Pokemon to pass their power forward through generations. Others suggest it might be something older, an artifact created by an ancient civilization that somehow resonates with the Eon Duo's psychic energy. But tragedy came to Alto Mare when those seeking power attempted to steal the Soul Dew and bend its energy to their own purposes. The thieves that understood that the artifact could be weaponized, its protective energy inverted into something destructive if manipulated correctly. They nearly succeeded, managing to tap into the Soul Dew's power and unleash a tidal wave that threatened to drown the entire city. Latios sacrificed itself to protect both its sister and the city it had guarded for so long, its life force merging with the Soul Dew to prevent catastrophe. In those final moments, the legendary Pokemon channeled every ounce of its psychic power into reversing the damage, pulling the water back, reinforcing the city's foundations, and ensuring that the Soul Dew could never again be corrupted for violent purposes. What remained was a legacy of protection, a reminder that even legendary Pokemon, beings of immense power, can choose to value others above themselves. Latias continued to watch over Alto Mare alone, carrying the grief of its siblings' loss while maintaining the same dedication to guardianship that had defined their shared existence. In the years since, Latias has been spotted occasionally by travelers who venture through the city's winding canals. Sometimes it appears in its true form, a graceful dragon with red and white plumage gliding between buildings. Other times it maintains a human disguise, walking among the citizens as one of them, listening to their conversations, observing how the city has grown and changed since that day of tragedy and triumph. The story of Latios' sacrifice spread through Hoenn and beyond, becoming one of the clearest examples of legendary Pokemon forming genuine emotional bonds with the places and people they protect. It demonstrated that legendary status does not equate to detachment, that even beings whose lifespans stretch across centuries can feel love and loss with the same intensity as any other creature. High above Hoenn's atmosphere, beyond where even the legendary birds normally fly, another presence occasionally manifests. Deoxys originated not on the planet itself, but in the void between worlds, a virus that mutated when exposed to cosmic radiation during its journey through space. When meteors carrying this transformed virus crashed into the ocean near Hoenn, something unprecedented occurred. The virus gained consciousness and took physical form as a Pokemon. Deoxys's body defies conventional biology. It can shift between 4 distinct forms, each one optimized for different purposes. Its normal form balances offense and defense evenly, presenting a stable configuration for general existence. The attack form elongates its arms into whip-like tentacles, sacrificing durability for overwhelming offensive capability. The defense form compresses and hardens its body, creating armor-like structures that can withstand tremendous punishment. The speed form streamlines everything, becoming so aerodynamic that it can move faster than almost any other known Pokemon. These transformations happen fluidly, the crystalline core at Deoxys's chest glowing brighter as its body reconfigures according to need. Watching this process feels almost hypnotic, the way solid matter seems to flow, like liquid before resolidifying into completely different shapes within seconds. As an alien life form, Deoxys lacks the instinctive understanding of Earth's ecosystems that native legendary Pokemon possess. When it first arrived, it acted according to logic that made no sense to terrestrial beings, interfering with weather patterns not from malice but simply because it did not understand what weather was or why it mattered. Its presence disrupted electromagnetic fields, causing compasses to spin wildly and electronic equipment to malfunction within miles of its location. Rayquaza, as the guardian of the atmosphere, perceived Deoxys as a threat and immediately moved to drive it away. The resulting battle in the upper atmosphere became the stuff of legend, 2 beings of immense power clashing at altitudes where the air grows thin and the curve of the planet becomes visible below. Rayquaza's hyper beam attacks carved through clouds and ionized air, while Deoxys countered with psychic assaults that created visible distortions in space itself. But the conflict was not as simple as aggressor and defender. Deoxys had not come to Earth seeking conquest or destruction. It was lost, confused, trying to understand an environment completely alien to anything it had encountered before. Its DNA, originally just simple viral genetic material, had been overwritten by cosmic radiation into something far more complex, something capable of thought and feeling, but still lacking context for those experiences. Eventually, communication became possible, whether through Rayquaza's growing understanding that Deoxys posed no intentional threat, or through Deoxys developing enough awareness to recognize that its actions were causing harm, the hostility diminished. The two legendary Pokémon reached an understanding, not quite friendship, but a mutual acknowledgement that they could coexist without conflict. Deoxys now appears sporadically in Hoenn skies, often near the impact site where it first arrived. Some researchers have attempted to study it, to understand how something so fundamentally different from Earth based life could not only survive, but thrive in an environment that should be hostile to its biology. But Deoxys remains elusive, appearing and vanishing according to patterns no one has successfully predicted. The arrival of Deoxys raised profound questions about life's diversity throughout the universe. If a simple virus could mutate into a legendary Pokemon during space travel, what other forms of life might exist on distant worlds? Could Pokemon, as a phenomenon, be universal rather than planetary, with different evolutionary pressures producing different results but similar outcomes across countless star systems? There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these when we transition from the elemental clashes of Hoenn to something even more fundamental. Sinnoh takes us beyond mere physical forces, beyond the creation of land and sea, into the actual structure of existence itself. Here, legendary Pokemon do not just shape the world, they are the world, or at least the principles upon which the world operates. At the center of it all stands Arceus, a being described in ancient texts as the original one, the Pokemon that emerged from a cosmic egg before the universe itself took form. Arceus created time, space, and matter through acts of will so fundamental that they require no explanation. They simply are, because Arceus made them so. The mythology surrounding Arceus speaks of a moment before moments existed, a space before space had meaning, a time before time began to flow. In that impossible pre-existence, an egg appeared containing within it everything that would eventually unfold into the universe we inhabit. When Arceus emerged from that egg, its first actions set in motion all of causality, all of physics, all of reality as we understand it. From Arceus came Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, three beings assigned dominion over time, space, and antimatter, respectively. Dialga's heartbeat marks the passage of time itself, each pulse moving the universe forward by one infinitesimal increment. Without Dialga, time would cease to flow, events would freeze in place, and the concept of causality would become meaningless. Every second that passes, every moment that flows into the next, occurs because Dialga maintains the river of time. Its consciousness spans all of temporal existence simultaneously, aware of past and future as easily as present, experiencing history not as a linear progression, but as a complete whole that can be observed from any angle. Scientists in Sinnoh have theorized about what would happen if Dialga's function were interrupted. Would time stop entirely, freezing every particle in place? Or would time fragment, different regions experiencing different flow rates until reality itself became too incoherent to sustain? The possibilities inspire both fascination and dread, for tampering with time's fundamental structure carries risks beyond calculation. Palkia controls the fabric of space, determining how distances relate to one another, how dimensions intersect, how separate locations can exist simultaneously. Its power allows it to distort space at will, bringing distant places into close proximity or stretching short distances into impassable gulfs. The architecture of the universe, the way matter arranges itself across three-dimensional space, exists because Palkia maintains those dimensions. Without its influence, the concept of here and of there would lose meaning. Locations would cease to have fixed relationships to one another, and the very notion of distance would collapse into incoherence. Before we continue this gentle journey, maybe tap subscribe for more peaceful videos, and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Giratina occupies a more complicated position. Created alongside Dialga and Palkia, it was meant to embody matter itself, but something went wrong during its formation. Giratina's nature became inverted, twisted into antimatter, and its presence in the regular world threatened to annihilate everything it touched. Arceus, with what might have been sorrow or might have been pragmatic necessity, banished Giratina to another dimension entirely. This place, later called the Distortion World, operates according to rules that contradict normal physics. Gravity points in multiple directions simultaneously, creating impossible geometries, where up and down lose meaning. Solid surfaces become transparent without warning, allowing passage through what should be impassable barriers. Time moves erratically, or not at all, moments stretching into hours, while hours compress into seconds. Giratina adapted to this strange realm, becoming its sole inhabitant, its guardian, and eventually its prisoner. The Distortion World shapes itself around Giratina's consciousness, responding to its thoughts and emotions in ways that the material world never could. When Giratina feels calm, the realm stabilizes somewhat, its impossible physics at least becoming predictable. When Giratina experiences distress, the Distortion World fragments further, reality breaking down into increasingly chaotic configurations. The relationship between Giratina and its siblings carries undertones of tragedy. Where Dialga and Palkia can interact with the world directly, shaping time and space according to their nature, Giratina must remain forever separated, its antimatter essence too dangerous to allow into normal space. And yet it remains connected to them, the three creation dragons, forming a triad that together defines the structure of existence. Ancient texts, preserved in Sinnoh's libraries, speak of a time when Giratina attempted to escape the Distortion World, breaking through barriers that Arceus had established to contain it. The attempt nearly succeeded, and for a brief period, Giratina walked on material Earth, experiencing solid ground and flowing time, and the simple joy of existing in a realm not shaped by its own tormented consciousness. But its presence immediately began to destabilize reality. Matter and antimatter cannot occupy the same space without mutual annihilation, and Giratina's very existence in the material world started chain reactions. There are moments in every region when the sky shifts colors without warning, when the ground trembles beneath ancient stones, when the very air feels heavier than it should. These are the moments when something greater than ourselves moves through the world, when forces older than memory stir from their long slumber. Tonight, we drift through the stories of those beings who shape entire landscapes with their presence alone, who guard the delicate balance between creation and chaos. Material reality. Before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe for more gentle videos, and let me know where you're listening from tonight. These are the legendary Pokémon, and their stories reach back to the very beginning of everything we know. Some were born from the void before time itself existed, while others emerged from the desperate ambitions of those who sought to control what should never be controlled. Each one carries with it a weight of history, a purpose woven into the fabric of existence itself. These are not physical forces. We will travel slowly through every region, pausing in the quiet spaces between facts to let the stories settle around us like an evening mist. All knowledge from Kanto's frozen caves, where ice crystallizes in impossible patterns, to Paldea's deepest crater, where time moves differently than anywhere else. We will trace the paths these beings have carved through legend and reality that govern physics. In the vastness of the Pokémon world, not every extraordinary being occupies the same space in our understanding. There exists a subtle distinction, one that separates those who are woven into the very structure of regional history from those who exist just beyond the edges of what can be proven. The legendary Pokémon stand at the center of creation stories, their names spoken in every village, their presence shaping the way entire civilizations developed over thousands of years. It defaults to the only mythical Pokemon, however, dwell in a different realm altogether. To make room, they are whispered about in voices that grow quiet, and so when strangers approach, creatures whose existence some believe in with absolute certainty, while others dismiss as elaborate folklore. Their appearances are so rare that generations pass without a single confirmed sighting, and yet the stories persist, passed down through families like precious heirlooms. That mortal minds as we drift a little deeper tonight, consider how these categories blur at their edges. Describe the experience as a legendary Pokemon in one region might be considered mythical in another, in ways that known only through ancient texts that few bother to read anymore. The difference often lies not in the creatures themselves, but in how deeply their stories have embedded themselves in the collective memory of the people who live alongside them. The information arrives the legendary birds of Kanto, for instance, have been seen by enough trainers over the decades that their existence cannot be reasonably doubted. They appear in weather patterns, leave the physical traces of their passage, and occasionally reveal themselves to those who venture into their territories with the right combination of respect and determination. Embodies an emotion, but even these well-documented beings maintain an air of mystery, love to hate, choosing when and where they appear according to logic that remains unknowable to most. Occasionally rising to mythical Pokemon, by contrast, might be encountered only once in a trainer's entire lifetime. Their feelings, if becoming more vivid, they manifest during specific conditions. This vanish without explanation, and leave behind only the faintest evidence of their presence. Understand themselves better. Some researchers spend decades pursuing a single confirmed sighting, following rumors across continents, only to come away with nothing more than second-hand accounts and ambiguous photographs. The story must begin somewhere. And so we return to Kanto, where the franchise itself first took root in the collective imagination of a generation. This region, with its mixture of urban sprawl and wild landscapes, holds within it the seeds of everything that would come after. Paralyzed by in laboratories and mountain caves, on windswept islands, and in the deepest forests, the first legendary Pokemon made themselves known. Radiates from it. Before we continue, maybe tap subscribe for more calming videos, and tell me where you're listening from tonight. This passive influence, long before trainers walked the routes between cities, long before anyone thought to categorize and study these beings systematically, Mew existed in the jungles far from civilization. Now, the researchers who discovered it in Guyana could never have imagined what their find would eventually lead to. Here was a creature whose genetic code seemed to contain echoes of every other Pokemon, as though it stood at the root of an evolutionary tree so vast that its branches reached into every ecosystem on the planet. Others approached with hearts. The implications stretched beyond simple biology. If Mew truly represented a common ancestor, then the diversity of Pokemon life itself became something that could be traced backward, followed like a thread through the tangled history of the natural world. But Mew itself offered no explanations, no convenient answers to the questions its existence raised. To maintain those who encountered it described a playful being, curious and gentle, with psychic abilities that manifested in ways that seemed almost whimsical. It would vanish mid-conversation, reappear on the other side of a clearing, transform its shape into that of other Pokemon with apparently no effort whatsoever. This was not a creature that operated according to rules anyone understood. Slowly, the story widens to encompass what came after that discovery. The scientific community, confronted with evidence of such extraordinary genetic potential, could not resist the temptation to experiment, to push boundaries, to see what might be possible if human ingenuity could harness what nature had created over eons. In a laboratory on Cinnabar Island, surrounded by volcanic stone and the constant sound of waves against cliffs, something unprecedented began to
Those
take
who
shape.
tap too deeply into
The scientists
power
working there
sometimes
had obtained
find
genetic
themselves
material from
unable to accept
fragments
limits,
of DNA
pushing forward
that they believed
even
could
when
be
prudence
enhanced,
demands retreat,
refined,
maintaining
improved
commitment
upon.
to goals long
They
after
envisioned
those goals
creating the
have
ultimate
become harmful
Pokemon,
or impossible.
one that would possess all of Mew's potential,
wisdom,
but amplified,
stubbornness,
focused,
and
made more
stubbornness
powerful
can
through
destroy
careful
as
manipulation.
surely as apathy.
The journals left behind
Together,
in the abandoned
these three
mansion
legendary
tell a
Pokemon
story of
form a
gradual
triad that
escalation.
balances the cosmic power
Early entries
of
speak of
Dialga and
excitement,
Palkia.
of breakthrough
Without
after
knowledge,
breakthrough,
emotion,
as
and
cells
will,
divided and
even
grew
beings
according to
capable of
plan.
controlling time
The
and
scientists
space
saw
would lack
themselves
purpose.
as pioneers,
And without time
pushing
and
into
space in
territory
which to
where
exist,
no one had ventured
knowledge,
before.
emotion,
They
and will
documented everything
would have no
meticulously,
context in which
convinced
to
that future
manifest.
generations would
The late
study their
Guardians
work
and the
as a
creation
turning
trio
point in
exist
humanity's
symbiosis,
understanding
each
of
group's
Pokemon.
existence giving meaning
But the tone
to
in
the
those
other's
journals
power.
shifts as
Ancient
the project
Sinnoh
progresses.
mythology presents
There
these
are
six
mentions of
legendary
unexpected
Pokemon
complications,
as
of a
Arceus'
consciousness
solution
emerging
to a
faster
fundamental
and with
problem.
more intensity than
Creating the
anticipated.
universe was not sufficient.
The creature they were
The universe
creating
needed to contain
began to
beings
exhibit
capable of
awareness
experiencing
before
it,
its physical
of
form
finding meaning
had fully
in
stabilized,
existence,
and
of
that
making
awareness was
choices that
accompanied
shaped
by
their own
something the
destinies.
scientists had not planned
Time,
for.
space,
Questions about its
and
own
matter
existence,
provided the framework,
about the nature of its
but knowledge,
creation,
emotion,
about
and
why it
will
had been brought
provided
into
the
being.
content that made the
There's a
framework
quiet
worth
comfort in
inhabiting.
remembering moments like
On
these,
an island near
not because
Sinnoh,
they ended
two
well,
more legendary
but because they
Pokemon
remind us
exist
that even the
in
most
eternal
carefully laid
opposition,
plans
though neither
can
seeks
unravel when we
conflict with
forget
the
to
other.
consider what we are actually
Cresselia
creating.
embodies pleasant dreams.
Mewtwo was
the
not
restful
simply a more
sleep
powerful
that allows
version of Mew.
minds to process
It was something
experiences
entirely
and
new,
prepare for
a
waking.
being with its own thoughts,
Its presence
its
brings
own will,
peace to troubled
its own
sleepers,
growing sense of
transforming
identity and
nightmares
purpose.
into gentle visions.
The final
that
entries
soothe
in those
rather than
journals
frighten.
speak of power beyond
Those who see
control,
Cresselia
of
describe
psychic
an
abilities
overwhelming sense
that
of
overwhelmed every
tranquility washing
containment
over them,
system the
worries
scientists had
and
devised.
anxieties fading into
Mewtwo
background
destroyed
noise
the
that
laboratory
no longer
and
demands
everyone
attention.
in it, not out
The
of
legendary
malice necessarily,
Pokemon glows
but
with
because it
soft
could
light
not tolerate
that
remaining
seems to
imprisoned
emanate from within
in a
its
place
body,
where its only
and
purpose
particles
was to
that
serve
resembled aurora
as an
shimmer
experiment.
in its wake
It
as
fled
moves
into
through
the
air.
unknown reaches of Cerulean
Cresselia
Cave,
appears to those
where it remained for
experiencing
years,
severe
wrestling with
psychological
questions
distress,
about identity
manifesting
and
in their
belonging
dreams,
that no
and
Pokemon
offering
before
respite
it
from
had
whatever
ever
trauma
needed to confront.
or anxiety plagues
While
them.
Mewtwo's story
It cannot
unfolded
erase
in
the
secret,
sources of distress,
three other legendary
cannot undo
beings
painful
moved through
experiences,
Kanto's
or
skies and
resolve
peaks,
ongoing problems,
embodying
but it
forces
can
that had
provide the
existed
mental rest
long before
necessary
humans arrived
to
to
face
name
those challenges
and categorize
with
them.
renewed strength.
Articuno,
Darkrai presents a
Zapdos,
stark
and
contrast.
Moltres represent
Though its nature
something
is not
primal
as simple
about the
as
world itself,
opposite of Cresselia
the
might
elemental
suggest.
powers that shape weather,
Where Cresselia
that
brings
determine whether
pleasant
crops
dreams,
flourish or
Darkrai
fail,
creates
that can bring
nightmares,
either
but not from
life-giving rain
malice.
or
It
destructive
has
storms.
no control over this ability.
Articuno
Cannot
dwells in
choose to
frozen
suppress the
places
fear-inducing
where few
aura
dare to
that
venture.
radiates from its presence.
The Seafoam Islands,
Darkrai
with their
lives in
labyrinthine
isolation
caves and
because it
treacherous
does
ice
not wish to
flows,
harm others,
provide exactly
but
the kind of
isolation
environment
alone
where
cannot
this
prevent its
legendary
influence
bird
from
feels
affecting
most at
anyone
home.
who ventures
Those
too
who have
close.
glimpsed it describe
The
wings
nightmares
that
Darkrai
trail
causes
crystalline frost in
tap
their
into
wake,
each
a
person's
presence
deepest
that seems to
fears,
lower the temperature
manifesting
of
scenarios
everything nearby,
that the conscious
and
mind
eyes
might
that
never
hold
acknowledge.
intelligence,
These dreams
ancient
force
and patient.
confrontation with anxieties.
The bird does not
that waking
create winter
thoughts
single-handedly,
suppress, dragging
but its
hidden
movements
traumas
through certain
into
regions often
consciousness where they
coincide
cannot be
with
ignored.
unusual cold
For
snaps.
some, this unwilling
With blizzards
therapy
that arrive
helps
without warning
process difficult
and blanket
emotions.
entire valleys
For
in snow.
others, it
It
simply
is both a
adds to
herald and
psychological
an
burdens
embodiment of ice
already
itself,
nearly too heavy
and the
to bear.
Pokemon that naturally inhabit
Darkrai has
frozen
tried to escape
environments
its nature,
seem to show it
to
a
find
kind of
ways of
reverence,
existing without
moving
causing
aside when it
suffering.
passes overhead.
Ancient stories
Zapdos
preserved
presents
in
a
Sinnoh
stark
tell of
contrast,
Darkrai
crackling
journeying
with
to remote
electrical energy
locations,
that makes the
hoping
air
that distance
itself
from
hum
civilization
with
would
tension.
mean its nightmares affected
The abandoned
no one.
power plant,
But
where
Pokemon
trainers
lived
sometimes
everywhere,
encounter it,
and
seems
wild
almost
creatures
laughably
suffered from
inadequate
Darkrai's presence,
as a dwelling
just as
place for
humans
such a
did.
being.
It tried
Electrical
masking its
equipment
aura
sparks
with
and
other
fails
psychic
in its
energies,
presence.
creating
Circuits
shields that
overload
might
without
contain the
explanation,
nightmare-inducing
and
power.
thunderstorms
But the
gather
effort
overhead,
required constant
even on days when
concentration
the forecast
that left it
called for clear
exhausted,
skies.
and the shields
There are
inevitably
accounts
failed.
from ship captains
It sought
who have seen it
Cresselia,
flying through
hoping that
storm
the two of
clouds
them together
far
might
out at
find
sea, balance, each beat of its wings accompanied by branching lightning that illuminates the darkness for miles in every direction. It does not cause every thunderstorm, but there seems to be a connection between its movements and the most powerful electrical disturbances that sweep across the region.
On an island.
As we drift a little deeper tonight, we come to Moltres, the flame Pokemon that makes its home in the volcanic heart of Victory Road.
To value others'
Here,
well-being,
where
above
trainers
its own
must
comfort.
navigate through the
A
final
sacrifice that
challenges
receives no
before
recognition,
reaching the Pokemon
because
League.
those who might
This
appreciate
legendary
it
bird
remain
roosts
unaware
among
of the
rivers of
discipline
lava
required to
and
maintain
chambers filled with
The
superheated
relationship
air.
between Cresselia
Its
and
feathers
Darkrai
glow with their
fascinates
own
researchers
internal
who study
heat,
legendary
and its cry
Pokemon
echoes
dynamics.
through stone corridors
They represent not
like the
opposition
roar
in the
of a
sense
furnace.
of enemies, but rather
Moltres
complementary
embodies not
forces
just fire,
that together
but the
create
concept
full
of renewal that
spectrum
fire
of dream
represents.
experience.
Forests
Sleep
that
without
burn
dreams
make way for
would
new
be
growth.
merely
Volcanic
unconsciousness,
soil produces
and
the
dreams
richest
without both
farmland,
pleasant
and the heat
and
of summer
unpleasant
follows the
content
cold of
would
winter
lack the
in an
complexity that
endless
makes
cycle.
them useful
This
for
bird
processing
exists at
waking
the heart of that
experience.
cycle, neither
Some
creating
philosophers
it
in
nor
Sinnoh
controlling it
argue
entirely,
that Darkrai
but
serves a
serving as its
necessary
living
function, that
representation.
confronting fears
The
during
three
sleep
birds together
builds
form a
resilience
kind of
for facing
equilibrium.
them while awake.
When one becomes
They
too
point to
active,
evidence that
when
people
ice
who never
spreads too
experience
far,
any nightmares
or storms
often
rage
struggle
too
more with
frequently,
anxiety during
the others
waking
seem to
hours,
respond,
lacking the practice
re-establishing
of
balance
processing
through
fear
their mere
that
presence.
bad dreams provide.
It is not cooperation
But
in
this
any
perspective
deliberate sense,
offers cold
but rather a
comfort
natural
to Darkrai
regulation
itself,
that occurs
which
because these three
experiences only
legendary
the immediate
beings
suffering it
exist in
causes,
relation to one
not
another.
any long-term benefits
Our journey
its
carries us
existence
westward now
might provide.
into Johto,
As
a
we
region
drift
where
a little
ancient
deeper
and modern
tonight into the
exist
history
side
of
by
legendary
side
Pokemon,
in ways that
we
feel
find
more
ourselves
pronounced than
considering
elsewhere.
questions that
Here,
have no simple
traditions run
answers.
deeper, and the
What
connection
happens when
between
two
people and
fundamental
legendary
principles
Pokemon
cannot
has been
coexist?
maintained through
When
centuries
truth
of
and
careful
ideals
stewardship
clash
and
so
respect.
completely that
The
compromise
stories
becomes
here
impossible.
feel older somehow,
Unova's legendary
less shaped
Pokemon
by recent
tell a
events,
story about such
more
a
rooted in a
conflict,
time when the
one that nearly
boundaries
destroyed
between the
the region
human and
centuries ago
Pokemon
and
worlds
continues
were
to
less
shape its culture
clearly
today.
defined.
In
In
Unova's ancient
Ekritique
past,
City,
a
two
single
towers
dragon
once
Pokemon
stood
existed,
as
a
monuments
being
to
of
this
such immense
connection.
power that
The
no
Brass
other
Tower
legendary
and the Bell
creature in the
Tower
region
rose into the
could match
sky,
it.
each
This
one a
original
testament to
dragon
the bond
worked
between
alongside
humanity
two brothers,
and the legendary
heroes,
birds that made
who
their
had
home in
united all
Johto's
of Unova
skies.
under their leadership.
But where Kanto's legendary
dragon
birds
represented
embody
both
raw
truth and
elemental power,
ideals in
Johto's
perfect
legends
harmony,
speak to
its
something
power
different:
flowing equally
the cycle of
to
life
both
and
brothers
death,
as
the
they worked
possibility of
together
rebirth,
to create a
and the
just
terrible
and
consequences
prosperous society.
of breaking sacred bonds.
The brothers complemented each
The
other.
towers
perfectly at
themselves
first.
represented
One
architectural
brother's
achievements
commitment to truth
that modern builders
provided
struggle to
clear-eyed
replicate.
assessment of problems
Each
and
stone
circumstances,
was cut to
while the
precise
other brother's
specifications
dedication to
and fit
ideals
together
supplied
without
vision
mortar,
and
held in
motivation
place through
to
engineering
improve upon
genius,
current
and
conditions.
possibly through something more mystical.
Together, they
The
governed
brass
wisely
tower gleamed
their
in
different
sunlight,
perspectives,
its metal
creating a more
components
complete
reflecting light
understanding
and
than
patterns
either could achieve
that
alone.
changed throughout the day,
But perfect harmony
creating an
rarely
ever-shifting
lasts forever,
display
and the
that
seeds of
observers
discord
found
that would
mesmerizing.
eventually tear the brothers
The bell
apart
tower,
were present
constructed
from the beginning.
primarily of wood
The differences
and
in
traditional
their
materials,
initially
contained
productive,
massive bells
gradually
whose
hardened
tones
into
could be
opposing
heard across the
positions
entire
that
region
admitted
when
no
rung.
middle ground.
These bells
What began
served
as
both
healthy
practical
debate
and
evolved
ceremonial
into increasingly
purposes,
bitter arguments
marking important
that threatened
moments
the
in the
stability
community's
of
calendar
everything they had
and
built
summoning
together.
people to gatherings
Their disagreement
when
grew
decisions
more
affecting
intense until the
everyone
dragon
needed to be
itself
made.
could no longer maintain
3 centuries
unity.
before our time,
The legendary
before any
Pokemon
living
found
trainer
itself
can
pulled in
remember,
2 directions
a lightning strike
simultaneously,
set the brass
asked to
tower
embody
ablaze.
principles that
The
had
fire
become mutually
consumed
exclusive
everything,
in the minds of its
burning so
partners.
hot and so fast
Something
that no
unprecedented
amount of
occurred.
water could
The
extinguish
dragon
it.
split itself in
3
two,
Pokemon
creating
perished in that
Reshiram
conflagration,
and Zekrom,
ordinary
each one
Pokemon
embodying
by most
one of the
accounts,
brothers'
but ones
philosophies
who had
perfectly.
dwelled in the tower for
The
so
split
long
was not clean
that they
or
had become
painless.
part of
Versions
versions speak
from
of
this
tensions
division
within
rippled across
Ekritique
Unova,
City,
causing
conflicts
earthquakes
between
and
factions
storms
that might have led to
devastated the surrounding
sabotage.
landscape.
Still others
Reshiram
whisper
became
about
truth
curses,
incarnate,
about warnings
breathing blue
ignored,
fire that
about
burns
hubris
away
that
all
invited
falsehood
divine punishment.
and illusion.
What is certain
flames
is
do
that
not
the
simply
fire
destroy
started at the
physically.
tower's
They
pinnacle
reveal reality in
and
its
spread
purest
downward
form,
with unnatural
stripping away
speed.
comforting lies.
Witnesses
and
described
convenient
flames that
self-deceptions
seemed to burn
to
in
expose
colors
uncomfortable
fire should not
facts
possess,
that people
heat
would
so
prefer to
intense
ignore.
that people
Those
hundreds
who
of
allied
feet away
themselves
felt their
with
skin
Reshiram
blister.
valued this
The
brutal
metal
honesty,
components of the
believing
tower
that only by
melted
confronting
and ran
reality
like
directly
water, pooling at the structure's base in grotesque formations that cooled into shapes suggesting anguish and suffering.
Dangerous fantasy.
Rescue attempts proved futile.
People astray.
Those who tried to
because they
enter the
ignored
burning
actual
tower were
circumstances.
driven back by heat
He
and
pointed
smoke,
to failed
while
projects
aerial
and
approaches
misguided
failed
policies,
because flying
all born
Pokémon
from
refused to venture
acknowledge
near the
inconvenient
flames.
facts.
It was as if the
His
fire
philosophy
itself
held
possessed
that the world must
malevolent
be seen
intelligence,
clearly
actively
before it can be
preventing
changed
interference
effectively.
with its destructive purpose.
Zekrom embodied
The
ideals,
3 Pokémon who
generating
perished
electricity
were not legendary
that
beings,
represents the power
but they were
to
beloved
change the
estimate by
world
the community.
with the force of will.
They had lived in the
Its
tower for
lightning does
generations,
not merely strike
tended by
physically,
priests who
it
maintained
energizes
the
those who believe
sacred
in something
spaces
better,
where humans and
granting them the
Pokémon
strength to
could meet
pursue
in
goals
peaceful
that seem
coexistence.
impossible.
Their
Those who
loss
followed
represented
Zekrom
more than simple
valued
death.
this
It
transformative
felt like a
vision,
rupture in the natural
believing that
order,
accepting
a
current
breaking of
reality
bonds
as
that
unchangeable
should have been inviolable.
guaranteed stagnation.
What happened
and
next
injustice.
transformed Johto's
The brothers who
understanding
partnered
of
with
death
Zekrom
itself.
argued that
From the
truth without
ashes of that
ideals
tragedy, the
leads to
3
cynicism
drew
and
new
despair,
legendary Pokémon
that merely
emerged,
acknowledging
their
problems
birth witnessed by
without
hundreds of
imagining
people
solutions
who had
serves
gathered
no
to mourn
purpose.
the tower's
He
destruction.
pointed to the suffering that
Ho-Oh,
existed throughout Unova,
the Rainbow Guardian,
all the
who had
injustices
roosted
that
atop
could
the
be
brass
rectified
tower for centuries,
if only people
descended
believed
through
change was
smoke and
possible,
ash,
and
its
committed
presence
to
bringing
pursuing
with it winds
despite obstacles.
that temporarily cleared the air.
Brothers and their
The
dragons
legendary bird
fought a terrible
cried
war,
out in a voice
one
that
that laid
resonated
waste
with
to
power
vast sections
beyond
of Unova,
sound,
and
and where
forced
its
both
tears
sides to
fell
confront
onto
the
the
consequences
ashes.
of their
Energy began to
absolutism.
gather.
Cities
Light
coalesced
burned into
as
3
Reshiram's
distinct
flames
forms,
revealed
growing
corruption
brighter and more
and
solid,
incompetence in
until
leadership,
3
but
entirely
offered
new
no
beings
solutions
stood where
for the
moments
chaos
before
that followed
only
exposure.
death and destruction
Farmland
had
turned
existed.
to ash under Zekrom's
Raikou,
lightning.
Entei,
The
and
energy of
Suicune
transformation
rose from the
lacking
ruins,
direction,
resurrected by
guided toward
Ho-Oh's
constructive
power, in an
rather
act
than
of creation that
destructive
witnesses
ends.
struggled to comprehend.
Civilians caught between
These
the
3
warring
beasts,
factions
as they
suffered
came to be
most of
called,
all.
embodied the
Those
very
who tried to
forces that had
maintain
destroyed
neutrality
them.
found
Lightning
themselves
that had
accused
sparked
of
the fire,
cowardice by
flames
both
that had
sides,
consumed
while
the
those who
tower,
picked sides
and water
often
that had
discovered
failed to
that
save
absolute
it.
commitment
The
to
transformation
either
was
truth
not
or
simply
ideals
resurrection,
demanded
but transfiguration.
sacrifices they were
The
unwilling to
Pokemon
make.
who emerged from Ho-Oh's
Families
blessing
split along
bore little
philosophical
resemblance
lines,
to those who had
friendships
perished.
shattered under the pressure
They were
of choosing
larger,
between
more
incompatible
powerful,
worldviews.
infused with abilities
The
that
war
elevated
dragged on
them
for years,
to legendary
neither
status.
side able to
Their
achieve
very
decisive
existence
victory
challenged
because
conventional
Reshiram and
understanding
Zekrom
of what
were
death
too
meant
evenly matched.
and whether it could ever be truly
Every
permanent.
advance by one brother
Raikou
was
roams
countered
the
by
land
the other.
with restless
Every
energy,
territory claimed
appearing
was
during
reclaimed.
thunderstorms,
Every
as
strategic
if drawn
advantage
to
was
the electricity
neutralized.
that fills the air.
The conflict became
Its
not
presence
just
brings
destructive
sudden
but
downpours
pointless,
that
a
last for
grinding
hours,
stalemate that consumed
rains falling
resources and
so
lives
heavily
without
that visibility
producing any
drops to
progress
mere
toward
feet,
resolution.
and rivers overflow their
end,
banks within
exhausted and
minutes.
seeing the destruction
Those
they
who
had caused,
encounter it describe
both
feeling the
brothers called
hair
for
on their
peace.
arms stand
They
on end,
recognized too
the
late
air
that
charged
their
with so much
philosophical
static
split had
that
been
every surface
artificial,
they touch
that
delivers a
truth and
small
ideals
shock.
were never meant to
The legendary
exist in
beast
isolation,
moves with
but
speed
rather in
that
dialogue
defies
with each
normal
other.
perception,
The
covering
realization
miles and
came at
seconds,
enormous cost,
appearing and
paid
vanishing
in
so
ruined
quickly
landscapes and
that
broken
witnesses
families.
often question
But it came.
whether they truly saw
Reshiram
it or
and
merely
Zekrom
imagined
returned
its
to dormancy,
presence.
waiting for
This
future
incredible
heroes
velocity
who might prove
serves
capable
practical
of wielding
purposes.
their power without
Raikou
falling
can
into
reach
the same
any
trap
point in
of
Johto
extremism.
within minutes of
The
sensing
dragons
a
separated
disturbance,
themselves from
allowing
human
it to
affairs,
intervene in
retreating
situations where
into
timing
hidden
matters.
locations where they would
But this
sleep
constant
until
motion
circumstances
also suggests
demanded
something
their
deeper,
awakening.
a restlessness
But the story does
that
not
might
end
stem
there.
from the
In some
traumatic
accounts,
nature
a
of its
third dragon
resurrection.
appears in Unova's legends.
Raikou never
Though
seems
its
to
nature
settle
remains
anywhere for long,
ambiguous, even in
never
the most
allows
detailed
itself the
histories.
luxury of rest or
This
relaxation.
dragon, called
It is
Kirin,
always moving,
represents what
always
remained
searching,
after
though
Reshiram
what it searches
and
for
Zekrom
remains
split
unclear
away.
even to
The
those who
empty
have
shell
studied
of
its
the original
patterns
dragon,
for decades.
still incredibly powerful.
Some
but
researchers
incomplete,
theorize that Raikou
longing
seeks
to return to
understanding
wholeness,
of its
but
own
unable
nature,
to reunite
trying to
its
reconcile
separated
memories
aspects.
of its previous existence
Kyurem
with
dwells
the
in a
reality
giant
of
chasm,
what it has become.
a frozen wasteland.
Others
where
suggest
has
it is
existed
drawn
in
to
isolation
storms,
for so long
not just by affinity
that ice
for
has
electricity,
claimed its body,
but by some
crystallizing
unconscious
around
desire
its form,
to return
like
to the
armor
moment of its
that both
death
protects
and
and
rebirth,
imprisons.
to relive that
The
transformation
cold seems to
in hopes
emanate
of
from
finding
within
meaning
Kyurem
in it.
itself.
Entei appears less frequently, but with no less impact. This legendary beast is said to be born anew with each volcano that erupts anywhere in the world, as if the destruction itself calls forth Entei's essence and gives it form.
As a reminder,
Whether this means multiple Enteis exist simultaneously, or whether a single Entei teleports between eruption sites remains subject to debate among scholars who track its appearances. Its passage leaves scorched earth behind, not from malice, but simply from the sheer heat that radiates from its body. Grass wilts and turns brown before Entei draws near. These leaves curl and crumble to ash as it passes, and the ground itself cracks beneath its paws as moisture evaporates from soil that moments earlier was damp and fertile. The heat Entei generates serves purposes beyond simple destruction, but in volcanic regions where it appears, the legendary beast's presence can redirect lava flows, channeling destructive force away from populated areas and toward paths where it will cause less harm. This protective aspect of its nature suggests that Entei, despite being born from destruction, has taken upon itself a guardian role that prioritizes prevention of catastrophe. Witnesses who have seen Entei describe it as moving with purpose and dignity, each step deliberate, each decision seemingly made after careful consideration. This contrasts sharply with Raiku's frantic energy, suggesting that while both legendary beasts emerged from the same tragedy, they processed that experience in fundamentally different ways. Before we move deeper, maybe tap subscribe for more relaxing videos, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. Suicune stands apart from its companions in temperament and purpose. Where Raikou and Entei embody violence and raw power, elements that destroy before they can build, Suicune represents purification, the cleansing force of water that washes away corruption and restores balance. It seeks out polluted lakes and rivers, and where it touches the water, impurities dissolve and clarity returns. This healing ability operates on both physical and spiritual levels. Contaminated water becomes safe to drink within minutes of Suicune's intervention, toxins breaking down into harmless components through processes that chemistry cannot adequately explain. But beyond removing physical pollutants, Suicune's presence seems to cleanse to something more subtle, an emotional or spiritual taint that accumulates in places where suffering has occurred. Communities living near water sources that Suicune has visited report changes that extend beyond improved water quality. People describe feeling lighter, as if burdens they had carried for years suddenly became easier to bear. Old grudges lose their intensity, long-standing conflicts seem less worth maintaining, and a general sense of peace settles over the area. For weeks after the legendary beast's departure, Suicune moves with grace that borders on the supernatural, its paws barely touching the ground as it runs, its crystalline mane flowing behind it in patterns that seem to defy wind and gravity. It can cross water surfaces without sinking, can leap distances that should be impossible given its size and weight, and can vanish into mist so completely that even experienced trackers lose its trail within seconds. The three beasts do not travel together, instead moving independently across the region, as if following routes that only they can perceive. Occasionally, trainers report seeing two or even all three in the same general area, but never close enough to interact directly. It is as if an invisible boundary keeps them separated, as if their very natures prevent them from occupying the same space for too long. This separation might stem from the circumstances of their resurrection. They were created simultaneously from a single act of divine intervention, but they were created as distinct beings with different purposes. Forcing them to remain together might undermine those individual purposes, might create conflicts between their natures that would prevent any of them from functioning optimally. from
Or perhaps the
unexpected
separation
angles.
is self-imposed,
Its combat style
each legendary
emphasizes
beast
flowing
choosing
movement
isolation
and precise
because
strikes
proximity
rather
to
than
the
brute
others
force
triggers
or calculated
memories of trauma
tactics.
they would prefer
Of
to
the
leave
three,
dormant.
Virizion
They died
seems
together,
most comfortable
were resurrected
interacting
together,
with humans
but that
on
shared
terms
experience
of
might have created
equality.
bonds they find
Where
painful to
Cobalion
acknowledge.
maintains distance,
Connections that remind them of what they
Terrakion views
lost
people with
when their
suspicion.
previous forms
Virizion
ceased to
sometimes
exist.
forms genuine
Ancient
connections
texts
with
preserved in
it
Ikutik's
encounters,
libraries
offering
speak
guidance
of rituals
and
that were
wisdom
performed
to
in the
those
brass
it deems
tower
worthy of
before its
such
destruction.
attention.
Ceremonies that
relationships
required
remain
coordination
temporary,
between
for
the three
Virizion's
Pokemon
duties as a
who would
sword of
eventually
justice
become the
prevent
legendary
long-term
beasts.
attachments.
These
But while they
rituals
last,
supposedly
they
maintained
provide
harmony
glimpses
between
of what
competing
legendary
forces
Pokemon
in nature,
friendships might
preventing
look like.
any single element from
Keldeo,
dominating
the
to the
fourth
point
member,
where balance
started
collapsed.
as a young Pokemon
When the tower
who
burned
lost its
and
home
those
to
rituals
forest
could no
fires
longer be
that swept
performed,
through Unova
observers
during
noted
a period
changes
of
in
severe
Johto's
drought.
weather patterns.
Its parents perished
Storms
protecting
became
it
more
from the
severe
flames,
and less
it emerged
predictable.
from the devastation
Droughts lasted
alone,
longer than
frightened
historical
and
records
traumatized
suggested
by
they should,
everything it had
and the
witnessed.
transition
The other
between
three swords
seasons
of justice
grew more
found it
abrupt
wandering
and jarring.
aimlessly through burned
Some
landscape,
attributed these
too young to
changes
survive
to
on
the
its
loss
own,
of the tower
with nowhere
itself,
to go for
while
help.
others believed the
Thanks for
disruption
watching.
stemmed from
If
the
you
three
enjoyed
Pokemon's
drifting
deaths.
through these quiet moments,
The legendary
there's
beast's
another video
resurrection
waiting
may
on
have
the left of
restored
your
some of
screen.
what was lost,
Let it
but in
play while you
transformed
rest.
fashion.
You might discover
Where the
something
original
gentle
rituals
before
required
sleep
conscious
takes you again.
cooperation,